seem to be breathing a sigh of relief today. Most of the major markets have started the day off in the green, and some have even erased their losses from yesterday. Now, all of this comes as the U.S. Trade Representative says more than 50 countries have approached him to begin individual trade negotiations. CBC's Mark Carksall is in the studio now. He's been tracking all the latest developments for us. So walk us through what we've seen so far today, Mark.
Well, Natasha, you made a really key point right there in that this is trade value. This isn't people's actual money. If you didn't take your money out yesterday, then you didn't lose anything. And if you saw your stocks drop, if you play the long game, it doesn't even have to be that long, as today shows, you can get that value right back. Let's take you on the world tour now, Natasha. We'll start off in Asia, Hong Kong, where the Hang Seng index rose slightly after a really tough day yesterday. It has risen today, but not nearly enough to make up for yesterday's lost value. So they're going to have to play a slightly longer game for anyone who holds anything in the Hang Seng Index. Shanghai Composite Index rallied slightly today after losing 7% yesterday. The Nikkei in Tokyo also rallied up 6%, almost making up for the cliff that it fell off of yesterday. Outside of Asia, things look a little bit better. We go to Europe. European stocks make big gains today after yesterday's day of panic. You're looking London now 3%. In Frankfurt, Germany, a 3.2% rise. The CAC 40 in Paris, a 3.5% rise. Bringing it now over here to North America. We'll start off locally to Canada with the TSX, and also in the U.S., the Dow Jones. Both of those seeing raises today of roughly, the Dow Jones up about 3% today. The TSX bounced back about 1.5% at this point and rising. The S&P index up 3%. The NASDAQ, which is always tech heavy, more than 3% raise as well. As Natasha mentioned, a bit of a reprieve here. Yesterday was all about uncertainty. We saw those stocks tumble because people didn't know necessarily what the plan was for President Donald Trump and the White House and what they were doing moving forward with the tariffs that are set to be implemented tomorrow. There seems to be a little bit of hope now with news of the Treasury Secretary saying that many countries have reached out to try to make one-on-one deals, but there are still some economists out there like Justin Wolfers at the University of Michigan that don't quite feel as though the president knows what he's doing.
There's a deep mistake in Trump's understanding of trade policy where he thinks it's like a profit and loss statement. And if you buy more stuff from someone than they buy from you, they're ripping you off. The absurdity of this is, of course, I buy more stuff from my local supermarket than it buys from me, but there's no sense in which it's ripping me off. It's a fundamental Econ 101 mistake. I've met undergraduates who've made this mistake. The problem is that Trump has stuck with this mistake now for well over 70 years and surrounded himself with advisors by literally looking in the phone book to find the one or two people on earth who are capable of making the same mistake. So it's going to have to be the outside voices that move him, because the inside voices, logic, reason, and a global financial collapse so far haven't been enough.
That's what he says, but there are obviously a lot of people, Natasha, who believe in President Trump. You can call them inside voices, you can call them what they will, but if his plan, whatever it is, works out, then he's going to be saying, I told you so, to a lot of people. Of course, this follows a terrible day on the stock markets yesterday and into Thursday and Friday of last week, the worst since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll see if any of these individual deals between the U.S. and various countries work out, but there seems to be some optimism on the markets today.
Okay. CBC's Mark Carksall. Thanks so much, Mark. All right, friends, let's go to Edmonton just in time for the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, who's speaking at the mic. Let's take a look.
You're all ready to put Canada first for a change?
Yes, excellent. Quelle belle équipe ici, notre candidat, nos candidats.
A great team of candidates.
Them all as Ziad Abouteif, Jag Sharon, Singh Mahal. We have Saeed Ahmed, Billy Morin, Chief Billy Morin. Do you keep the title Chief forever? Excellent. So we can still, we'll be calling him Chief and we'll be calling him a Member of Parliament at the same time. And a great story. Balanced his budget, brought unemployment down 2/3, economic development he did for the Enoch Cree, what we need to do for all of Canada. We have the great Tim Uppal, Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party, is here. Miles Barry is with us as well. Wait, where's Miles? There's Miles. Thank you very much for your candidacy and your hard work. And of course, the legendary Matt Genereux, longtime servant to the people of Edmonton. Let's give him a round of applause. I want to give a big thanks to the workers here and, of course, the owners at Trail Tire Tamarack, a real Canadian success story. For 30 years, they've been keeping our cars and trucks moving in top-notch condition with the best mechanical work, diagnostics, tire work for cars and trucks. Bring your automobiles here. If anybody who has a Conservative membership gets free admission to the facility. They are really a symbol of everything that is great about our country. Hardworking people, getting up every day, building our country, doing their jobs, paying their taxes. But unfortunately, after the lost Liberal decade, they are paying more taxes than ever before, getting squeezed on all ends by a system that rips them off. After the lost Liberal decade, there are two classes of Canadians. There are the hardworking people behind me who pay too much and spend hours filling out paperwork for CRA. And then there are the global elites who dodge taxes using sophisticated overseas tax havens, who reap all the benefits of Canada and contribute nothing at all. This is life after the lost Liberal decade, and can you believe it? After doubling housing costs, increasing taxes by $10,000 per family, giving us the worst inflation in 40 years, and unleashing crime and chaos in our community, this same Liberal Party thinks they deserve a fourth term in power. Worse, Mark Carney was the economic advisor that helped bring about the lost Liberal decade, promoting high taxes and inflationary money printing that gave us the rising costs and the shrinking economy that is now under America's thumb. Mark Carney did all of this while his company dodged Canadian taxes. Can you imagine? He was advising Justin Trudeau to hike the carbon tax and increase inflationary spending, while his company stashed its cash in Bermuda to avoid paying their fair share. Mark Carney, like all Liberals, is a high-tax hypocrite, making you pay more while he dodges his bill. In
the last Liberal decade, Canadians' wages have stagnated, prices have gone up, and the cost of housing has doubled. After Justin Trudeau and the Liberals doubled the national debt on the advice of Mark Carney, your share of the tax burden has increased in order to pay back the federal government's debt. At the same time, Mr. Carney has been using tax havens in order to avoid paying his fair share. He has put his corporate money in a tax haven in Bermuda, in a post office box above a bike shop. So he is forcing you to pay more taxes when he himself is avoiding paying his bill, and he is still invested in the same business, so he has a huge conflict of interest.
The same Liberal MPs, same Liberal ministers, same Liberal strategists making the same Liberal promises think they deserve a fourth term in power. And that is the choice in this coming election. Do we want a fourth Liberal term of rising costs and crime and a falling economy under America's thumb? Or is it time for a change with a new Conservative government that will axe taxes, build homes, unleash our resources to bring home our jobs, and stand up to the Americans from a position of strength by putting Canada first? That's the choice. That's the choice.
It's the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal promises after the lost Liberal decade. Now, the choice in this election is this. Will we give the Liberals a fourth term to raise taxes and prices and crime and weaken our economy relative to the United States? Or does this need to change with a new Conservative government that will cut taxes, bring back jobs to Canada so that we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength for a change? That's the choice in this election.
Right now, Canadians pay more for government in higher taxes. They pay more in taxes than they do for food, clothing, and shelter combined. In fact, the average family is paying $10,000 more tax today than they were before the lost Liberal decade. And while you scramble to file before the deadline, checking every line to avoid being hit by a CRA audit, you learn that global Liberal elites are getting away without paying anything at all. One of these insiders happens to be Justin Trudeau's economic advisor and handpicked successor, Mark Carney. It turns out that at the same time he was advising Trudeau for higher taxes, Carney was stashing his company cash in an offshore fund registered to a post office box above a bicycle shop in Bermuda. Now, he didn't pick Bermuda for the weather. KPMG says that Bermuda has no capital gains tax, dividend tax, or withholding tax, making it one of the world's most notorious tax havens. In fact, Mark Carney's company has been called Canada's biggest tax dodger. Well, while you're double-checking your tax return to avoid a penalty, Carney and his global elite Liberal friends dodge theirs, and then they make the government raise taxes on these people behind me to pay the difference. Last year alone, the Liberals, with Carney advising them, wrote off $5 billion in corporate taxes, including $1 billion for just 5 companies. Meanwhile, the CRA was busy harassing small businesses and charities, forcing them to rifle through old receipts from 6 years earlier, charging fees and fines and endless accounting and lawyer fees falling on the backs of businesses not different than this one. You can't avoid your taxes. Global elites should not be able to either. And that is why I will end the Liberal two-tier tax system, where elites get loopholes and working people get audited. And I'm going to be putting hardworking Canadians first for a change. Here's how. 1, we will be naming a Bring It Home Economic and Tax Task Force, whose mandate will be to ensure that we close overseas tax havens and force the very wealthy to pay what they owe. My task force will specifically propose solutions to close loopholes that allow tax havens to be a source of evading taxes for the well-connected and the global elite. I'll also direct CRA to reapportion the use of its staff. We're going to have fewer auditors going after charities and small businesses, and more going after international tax evaders. The goal will be to collect an extra $1 billion from international tax havens and by closing the loopholes that enable them. We will create a public name and shame registry so that global, multinational, and billionaire tax dodgers are named and exposed so that everyone knows who they are. And we will expand the offshore tax informant program, giving whistleblowers up to 20% of recovered funds when they help expose illegal tax schemes. En tant que Premier ministre, je vais mettre
As
fin
Prime
au
Minister,
système
I will
fiscal
put an
de
end
vitesse
to the
des
two-tier
libéraux
tax
qui a
system
profité
introduced by the
Mark Carney et
Liberals,
des
which
autres élites
helped Mark Carney and other global elites.
fermer des échappatoires
We will
fiscales
end
et on va faire
tax
en sorte,
loopholes
on va réduire
and
le coût des
reduce
audits sur le
the
dos des
cost
travailleurs
of
et des
audits
petites entreprises.
for
Voici
small
comment.
business and Canadians. This is how. I've already said that I will introduce a task force in order to make our tax system more simple and more fair. And the final point, by saying it's fair, well, that means we will look for recommendations to close loopholes and put an end to tax havens. And today I am announcing that this task force will remove all the loopholes that allow large corporations and elites to use tax havens. I will also reapportion some of the resources at the Canada Revenue Agency, which are currently focused on harassing small businesses and non-profit organizations. So I will cut the number of auditors who are doing the audits of small businesses and increase resources so that we can tackle the problem of tax havens. In addition to that, we will put on the web a list that will publicly expose those who are defrauding the tax system and large corporations that are avoiding paying their fair share in Canada by putting their money in Bermuda and elsewhere. We will expand the offshore tax informant system, giving these informants up to 20% of the funds that are recovered when they help us to identify such schemes.
Expose offshore fortunes and bring the money home. All of this with the goal of reducing the tax burden on the people in this country. We'll do so with lower taxes for people like these great Canadians behind me. We're going to put them first for a change. We're going to cut income tax for the average worker by 15%. We're going to, so that their hard work actually pays off and they bring home more of each dollar they earn. We're going to axe the federal sales tax on new homes to save them up to $65,000 on the purchase of a house. We'll cut energy taxes by getting rid of the entire carbon tax for everything, for everybody, for real, for good, for a change. We're also going to get rid of, here's the other idea we're going to have. I'd like to know if the small business, you're the owner, sir? Yes, sir. So, you know, the Liberals tried to hit you with a capital gains tax increase. I've got a way better idea than that. I find it's funny that Mark Carney was the economic advisor who pushed that idea while he was dodging his taxes. Here's my idea. Let's cut taxes on people who bring investment home. So I'm going to pass the Canada First reinvestment tax cut. Zero capital gains tax when you reinvest your gains here in Canada. What do you think? So if you sell an investment and you bring it here to expand your garage, hire more workers, invest in new equipment that will help you repair more automobiles, you will be rewarded with a full tax deferral while you expand Canada's investment. This will allow us to bring home the hundreds of billions of dollars Liberals have pushed out of the country with their high taxes. It will allow home builders to build more homes for our youth. It will allow businesses to provide bigger paychecks for our workers. We want to protect jobs in Canada, including Canadian-made automobiles. That's why we will axe the federal sales tax on Canadian-made automobiles. Bring home our auto production. We're going to let traveling trades workers write off the full cost of their food, transportation, and accommodation. And we will back up the trades by training 350,000 young people to go through apprenticeships and work in great places like this. And we're going to unleash the production of our resources by repealing the Liberal no new development, no new pipelines law, C-69, the Liberal energy cap, gone, the Liberal industrial carbon tax, gone. We're going to unleash Canadian energy production to bring the jobs home to this country so we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength. Hold up.
We will reduce taxes by 15% so that work pays well for a change. And we will eliminate the GST on new homes to allow you to save up to $65,000 so that homes can be affordable for a change. We will cut taxes on energy so that people can produce more for a change. We will eliminate the GST on Canadian-made vehicles to bring back jobs and manufacturing here to Canada for a change. We will allow workers in the skilled trades to be able to deduct their food and clothing and travel. And we will ensure that some 350,000 new Canadians can be trained as apprentices and have a good paycheck for a change.
We'll put Canada's economy, our communities, and most of all, our workers and seniors first. we will unlock incredible potential of this country. We should be the richest nation on earth, but what it takes is having a new government with a real change that will axe taxes, approve construction of homes, pipelines, and other opportunities for Canadians. And that is what is at stake in this election. Canadians have a choice. After the lost Liberal decade, are they going to bring back the Liberals for a fourth term of rising crime and costs and a falling economy under America's thumb, or are they going to choose change with a new Conservative government that will axe taxes, unleash construction, build homes and pipelines so that we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength and put Canada first for a change? Let's bring it home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now take questions from the floor.
Thank you.
Good morning, Saprit from My Radio 580. You briefly mentioned scrapping Bill C-69, and your announcement this morning further elaborated on that. You've promised to scrap C-69 and fast-track energy projects. How do you balance that with the Indigenous land rights and environmental review processes, especially in light of the recent court rulings on Indigenous consultation?
Yes, you're a very good question. After the lost Liberal decade, Indigenous rights have been trampled by this Liberal government. Liberals blocked the Northern Gateway pipeline with Mark Carney's vocal, on-the-record opposition to that pipeline, even though 80% of First Nations people along the path supported the pipeline. They killed the Tech Frontier mine, even though all 20 First Nations communities around the mine were 100% in favor of it. And the Liberals are keeping our First Nations people in poverty by blocking the resource projects that their communities support. And we interpret Section 35 of the Constitution to go both ways, that we have to consult First Nations who are opposed to projects, but we have an obligation to consult also those that are in favor of them. The Liberals did not consult one First Nations community when they killed the Northern Gateway pipeline. And the result is that the 500,000 barrels of oil that we could have been sending to Asia at world prices every day are now going to the Americans at enormous price discounts. And make no mistake, it's the same Liberal MPs, same Liberal ministers, same Liberal strategists with the same Liberal policy. And Mark Carney testified against the Northern Gateway pipeline. So let's not, because he has a banker's haircut and he wears a normal pair of navy blue socks, don't think his position on these issues is any different than Trudeau. He supports C-69, which means there will not be another pipeline or LNG plant ever built again in this country. He supports the energy cap, which applies to Canadian energy but not American energy. He supports an industrial carbon tax, which will make major projects impossible to go ahead. So electing the Liberals to a fourth term will mean higher costs and crime and a falling economy under the American thumb. What we need is a change with a new Conservative government that will axe taxes, green light home building, pipelines, resources, so that we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength for a change. Thank you very much.
En français.
Merci beaucoup. Très bonne question.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. The Liberals ignored the Indigenous communities. They canceled the Northern Gateway pipeline, even though 80% of Indigenous communities were in favor of that project. And those communities would have received huge economic benefits had that project gone ahead. Mr. Carney testified against that project. The Liberals blocked the Tech Frontier mine, and there were 20 Indigenous communities around there who were 100% in favor of it. So Mr. Carney still supports Bill C-69, which is opposed by the premiers of the country, including the Quebec premier, and there will never be an LNG facility or pipeline here in Canada. We will continue to depend on the United States. These are the same Liberals, it's the same Liberal gang, and nothing will change. But we need a change. We cannot afford a fourth Liberal term with high costs, high crime, and an economy following under the thumb of the United States. We need change with a new Conservative government that will greenlight natural resource projects, build housing, cut taxes, so that Canada can be strong in the face of the United States for a change.
Welcome to Edmonton.
Thank you. Great to be back.
When just this last December, when Mark Carney was still running Brookfield and economic advisor to Trudeau, he talked about a deal he had worked out where his whole idea was to change government policy and then have Brookfield invest. This was about jet fuel in Texas, where they convinced governments to bring in 10% biofuel by 2030, biofuel being about 80 cents per liter more expensive. So he is both advising, and then his company is signing $1 billion deal to profit. Stephen Guilbeault, Gerald Butts, and Carney's own wife, Diana Fox, is involved in the same kind of consulting. What kind of impact has this kind of way of doing business had on the Canadian people and on the Canadian economy?
Well, it's crony capitalism. It works against these people behind me. Let's just unpack what Mr. Carney did in this particular case. He used his political power to convince the British government to require more expensive jet fuel for air travel. And then his company invested $1 billion in the company that was selling that jet fuel. So if, God forbid, a family like the people behind me here want to take their kids on a vacation somewhere, they have to pay higher airplane ticket prices to fund this more expensive jet fuel so that Mark Carney's $1 billion investment can pay off. Mr. Carney is not a businessman. He is a political grifter who has used his political influence to turn decisions that profit his company at the expense of workers and seniors. And that is exactly how he would govern the country. While he was Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, he went on the record saying that he thought there should be more inflation. He thought it would be good if there was more inflation. Well, it turns out Brookfield, his company, profits from inflation. They get to charge higher rents on their tenants, according to their CEO. So he has used his political influence to rip off workers and seniors, and now, with all the political power of a prime minister, he continues to be invested in the same company, Brookfield, the same company that benefits by raising inflation, by raising energy prices, and by ripping off workers and seniors. Today's announcement is another example of that. How would Mark Carney ever be trusted to make our tax system fair when he's invested in a company that has billions of dollars of cash stashed away in an overseas tax haven? Of course, he never would. We need a prime minister who will put Canada first for a change, who will stand up for lower energy prices, lower taxes, less inflation, bigger paychecks. I've been spending my entire adult life fighting for the people who are here behind me today, fighting for their paychecks, for their quality of life, for their future, to bring home Canada's promise. Thank you.
En français.
Merci. Oui. Donc, Mr. Carney
So Mr.
a passé
Carney
des années à
spent
utiliser
years
son influence
using
politique
his political
pour trafiquer
influence
son entreprise.
to benefit his company.
C'est le capitalisme des petites amies
That's called crony capitalism,
avec l'influence politique.
where you use your political influence to get ahead. And I can give you an example. Mr. Carney used his political influence
de la Grande-Bretagne
with the government of Great Britain
d'obliger l'usage d'un
to force the use
carburant plus cher
of more
pour les
expensive
avions.
jet fuel. Then after that, his company invested $1 billion in the company that sells that jet fuel. So he increased the cost of buying a plane ticket to go on vacation for a middle-class family in order to subsidize more expensive jet fuel that he personally profited from. He also said that he was in favor of inflation 4 years ago because his company, Brookfield, benefits from inflation. He advised Justin Trudeau to raise taxes here in Canada, while at the same time he was hiding his own investments in tax havens, including Bermuda. He is getting richer while Canadians are getting poorer. And that's exactly the opposite of what you want from a prime minister. But he still has those same investments that are contrary to the interests of our citizens and our workers here in Canada. So we need a prime minister who will put Canadians first, workers, seniors, and that's what I've been doing throughout my career. My political career, tax cuts it for our people, bringing back production to Canada for ourselves, a tax system that supports Canadians and not global elites. That's the goal here. So the choice is whether we want to give the Liberals a fourth mandate to increase costs on the backs of seniors and workers, or a new Conservative government that will put Canada first for a change.
One last thing in English. Mark Carney has been getting rich by making the working class poor. We need a prime minister who will do exactly the opposite, and that's why we need a new Conservative government for a change. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Mr. Poilievre. Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. I want to ask about...
How did you like our rally last night?
Well, I wanted to ask about your rallies.
Thank you.
And whether size matters. I actually want to know about your rallies and what your strategy is and who you're talking to, because you bring up things like woke mob, Century Initiative, bulldozing the CBC, I'm exaggerating, but getting rid of CBC HQ. At what point are you just talking in an echo chamber to people who already feel that way, or do you feel like these are broadening the tent of support to Liberal or undecided voters to get them on board with your campaign?
I think it's pretty broad. I think how many people do you think we had last night?
Thousands.
Well, that's pretty obvious. I think you can be more precise than that.
I don't. I mean, the party said 10,000 register. There's reports of 15. I really can't say.
One last question. When was the last time we had a rally that big in Canada?
I don't know. I've never been to a political rally that big, I don't think.
You know a lot about politics.
Well,
You're a very well-informed person. I know that if there were a bigger rally than that, you would know about it. I think so. But I think it was pretty incredible. Were any of you there? Yes. Magic, eh? Wow. Incredible. Listen, I think to have 10 or 15,000 people at one political rally, this is a movement like we've never seen, because people want change. They want to put our country first for a change. They've seen that after the lost Liberal decade of doubling housing costs, of rising crime, of taxes out of control, of our economy weak and under America's thumb, that they can't afford to live. And what they want is a new Conservative government that will put Canada first for a change. And that's why my speech talked about axing taxes, green-lighting housing construction, expanding our energy sector to bring home our jobs so that we can put Canada first for a change. That was the message yesterday, and that is the message that Canadians are going to vote for change on Election Day. Thank you.
En français.
Merci. Donc, merci de la question.
Thank you for that question.
Un rassemblement énorme,
a huge rally, probably one of the largest in decades, represents a people's desire for real change. In other words, cutting taxes, green-lighting the construction of housing, fostering the development of our own resources here in Canada, and strengthening our economy in relation to the U.S. for a change. People do not want a fourth Liberal mandate. They want real change. to put Canada first, and it is by voting Conservatives that we will get that.
We'll now go to the final question.
Hello, Mr. Poilievre, Radio-Canada. Many Haitians in Florida who are afraid of Trump want to come to Canada. Should we welcome them to this country or send them back to the U.S. if they try to come here? I am in favor of legal immigration. So when people arrive here in Canada, they have to, if they're asylum seekers, they have to show that they are true asylum seekers. After the lost Liberal decade, our immigration system is broken. The Liberals allowed massive fraud with respect to international students coming into the country, foreign workers, and false asylum seekers who are causing a shortage of jobs here in Canada, a shortage of housing, and a shortage of healthcare services. So I think we have to put an end to that kind of fraud and only welcome people to Canada who are true asylum seekers. We will be looking at this case by case when someone wants to come to Canada, and if they can show that they're true asylum seekers with no criminal record they can contribute to Canada, they should be able to stay. But if it's a fraudster who's not truly an asylum seeker, that person should be expelled. After the lost Liberal decade with a broken immigration system and a Prime Minister that still supports the Century Initiative, Canadians cannot afford a fourth Liberal mandate. There has to be real change to fix the immigration system, allow Canadians to have access to jobs and housing, and put Canada first for a change. Thank you.
That concludes today's press conference. Merci, ça conclut la conférence de presse.
Thank you.
We have been taking you to Edmonton, where Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative... Let's hang on a second.
After the lost Liberal decade, our immigration system is broken. They've allowed massive fraud in international student, temporary foreign workers, and in false refugee claimants. Obviously, if someone is a true refugee, who are truly endangered abroad and they come in under the proper rules, then they should be allowed to stay. But if they're a fraudster, they will have to go. And the choice in this election will be, after a lost Liberal decade that broke our immigration system.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. He's repeating his answer he just gave in French, now in English. But again, that is Pierre Poilievre in Edmonton, leader of the Conservative Party, offering another campaign stop, offering some more policy announcements in this federal election campaign, and answering questions from reporters. For more on this, let's turn to CBC's Julia Wong, who's joining us now live from Ottawa. So, Julia, you were listening in. What are the key takeaways for you?
Yeah, a few different things struck out at me. First, I want to talk about how Poilievre says that Canadians are getting squeezed, that they're paying too many taxes. And this is a message that really resonates with people in Alberta who already pay some of the lowest taxes in the entire country. And what Poilievre is saying is that global elites have dodged taxes, that they are using tax havens to the disadvantage of Canadians. And with some of these comments, you can tell, and he said so specifically, that he's directly targeting Liberal leader Mark Carney, who he says Carney's company avoided taxes and put money in Bermuda. And to be clear, these were not personal investments, but these were investment funds that Carney co-chaired when he was with Brookfield Asset Management, funds that were registered in Bermuda where there are tax advantages. And Carney has been criticized by other party leaders because less tax paid in Canada means that there is less money for things that Canada needs, like healthcare, infrastructure, so on and so forth. Now, Carney has said that taxes were paid in Canada and those were paid by Canadian entities. But what Poilievre is saying is that he wants to cut down on all of that. He really wants to bring the hammer down when people are using offshore tax havens. So he says he's going to be naming an economic and tax task force that will close loopholes that allow companies to stash their money offshores. He will also direct the CRA to not go after charities or small businesses, everyday Canadians. Instead, he wants to see the Revenue Agency go after businesses that are evading taxes and again, putting that money overseas. He says that his goal is to collect an extra $1 billion every year from those international tax havens. He will also create a public name and shame registry, which is quite unique, so that multinational tax dodgers are named and exposed, so that their names are out there in the public sphere, so that Canadians would know who is using accounts that are offshore. And he would also expand offshore tax informant program that would give whistleblowers up to 20% of recovered funds when they expose illegal tax schemes. So really emphasizing how he wants to bring money back to Canada, that he wants to go after people that are not putting money into Canada. And he emphasized that he wants to put money back into the wallet of everyday Canadians. So reiterating some things that we've already heard on the campaign trail, like axing the federal sales tax on new homes, getting rid of the entire carbon tax for, he says, everything for everybody. And that is a message that would really resonate in Alberta, where there is a lot of support for axing the carbon tax. And he said he would also axe the federal sales tax on Canadian-made automobiles, bring home auto production. And one last thing I do want to note, he talked about unleashing production of resources by repealing Bill C-69, which is the Impact Assessment Act, which many in the West, and Alberta in particular, have viewed in negative lens. They believe that that has stifled the growth of the energy sector, and that has really been to the detriment of Alberta in particular. So really speaking to a homegrown crowd right there. Poilievre, as we know, is from Alberta. He's from the Calgary area, and he is focusing on two different places in Edmonton as he makes the rounds today that I do want to point out. The riding that he was in when he was making that announcement was Edmonton Southeast. That is a riding that Edmonton Mayor Amarjeet Sohi is going after. You know, he's a former Liberal cabinet minister trying to get back into federal politics. So Poilievre being in that riding has significance. And later today, he will also be stopping in Edmonton Centre. Now, this is a riding that has flip-flopped in between the Conservatives and the Liberals, clearly by making his presence known, by being in that riding. Poilievre is hoping that his name, the energy from last night's rally, that will draw Conservative voters and that they will be able to reclaim that particular riding in Edmonton Centre.
CBC's Julia Wong in Ottawa. Thank you, Julia. Okay, let's stick with Pierre Poilievre and what's going on the campaign trail and invite to the conversation Conservative commentator Tim Powers. He's also the chair of Summa Strategies, a public affairs company, and he has also worked on Stephen Harper's campaign in the past. Tim, it's been a long time. Good to see you on the show.
Nice to see you, Natasha, and I promise no rhymes from me.
Okay. Tim, let me ask you, let's pick up where Julia left off, summarizing the event where Pierre Poilievre was just speaking. What really jumped out at me in terms of his commentating on the taxes is that he's addressing the two-tier tax system as he sees it. He wants to lower taxes for working-class people, remove taxes for first-time home buyers, zero capital gains tax cut for those who are reinvesting in Canada. All that seems like traditional Conservative policy. What I find interesting is this real drive to go after multinationals, Canadians living overseas, whether they're individuals or entities, and they're evading taxes. Is this a new course for the Conservative Party to really go after taxes in this tough way?
I don't know if it's a new course, but we haven't seen this to the same degree in this campaign until now, Natasha. You will know when Mr. Poilievre won the leadership, all that period of waiting between now and the federal election. He spent a lot of time focusing on so-called global elites. As you know, he talks about the World Economic Forum, and he wouldn't go and all of that. For him, that's a target-rich environment with a lot of voters because we still have, both in Canada and the United States, a large sentiment of anti-elitism. And to beat Mark Carney, I think what Pierre Poilievre believes he needs to do is continue to paint Mark Carney as an out-of-touch global elite. So I suspect we'll hear more of this. The other unique thing, I guess, about that in Alberta, when the seats he's targeting there, as we've seen highlighted again over the last couple of weeks, there's a greater sense of grievance in Alberta, and he's trying to play off that to his benefit.
Let's talk about the event last night. Another huge rally for Pierre Poilievre. I don't know how many people came, but it seems obvious, including with the exchange with Laura Stone, lots and lots of people, thousands and thousands of people. Okay, we get it. So what exactly is going on there? How is he managing to get, because all the leaders are popular amongst their constituency, but this drive, this desire to go to these rallies and the ability to get people out, what is he able to achieve there? How is that working?
Well, first of all, gold medal to Laura for her question as a Newfoundlander. I loved her humor. Does size matter? And Mr. Poilievre and a few others got a chuckle out of that. And we'll park that one there for now, Natasha. Nobody really knows. Look, what Pierre Poilievre, his team, Jenny Byrne and others have been really good at is mobilizing people and getting them out and getting them to events. And when you see those visuals and you heard the enthusiasm in Mr. Poilievre's voice in response to some of the questions about crowd size, it's about creating momentum. The challenge is, does it extend beyond, and we haven't seen evidence yet, we might, that beyond hardcore conservative voters. Pierre Poilievre has those voters locked up. To his credit, among conservatives, that is not an easy feat to do. We saw in the last two elections with Aaron O'Toole and Andrew Scheer, conservatives weren't as committed perhaps to their party as Pierre Poilievre has them now. So he's also sending a message with those crowd sizes to conservatives, stay with me, I'm going to get you there. Are there more people out there who aren't identifying as conservatives who are coming and that's going to sway them? Don't know, but look, never hurts you to have a visual that shows people enthusiastic about the message you're driving. But as a real quantitative measure, I don't know how much weight we should put in it at this juncture.
Tim, I hate to do this. We're tight on time, so I'm just going to skip to one final question, which is, lately, or maybe throughout the campaign, Pierre Poilievre has been criticized, or at least there's been the observation made that there is a lack of accessibility to him from reporters. We know that reporters are not going on the plane. That creates a set of challenges, but also that there is reporting from our colleagues who are on the ground that some of the reporters are being kept away. They need to shout their questions at him. This is a highly skilled, highly experienced professional politician, and he can answer these questions. So why is there all this safeguarding of the leader?
It's an excellent question because it's a risk he's taking on that he doesn't need to take on for all the reasons you just laid out there, Natasha. He's already won the crowd that thinks the mainstream media is self-interested and not going to give him a fair shake. He may be able to shake away some voters who are moving back and forth between the Liberals and the Conservatives, but want some serious answers and don't want slogans. If they continue down this path, that may not be to their best benefit.
All right, Tim Powers, thank you so much for your time. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Natasha.
Okay, folks, let's keep going with the federal election campaign. We want to hear from Canadians about what matters to them most in this election, whether it's healthcare and immigration. Those are issues that mean a lot to a number of Canadians, and our next guest is amongst that crowd. His name is Fedor Kozhenenko, and hopefully I pronounced that correctly. He's going to be voting for the first time in this federal election. Fedor, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Natasha.
How was the pronunciation before we move forward?
It's perfect. 9 out of 10.
Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. So listen, I hear that you moved to Canada in 2015 from Russia, and you just became a citizen last summer. Congratulations. Welcome to the family. Let's talk about the issues that matter most to you and why.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. There's really 4 issues that matter to me. Obviously, the number one priority for the country right now being the U.S. trade war, and 3 others that I can name are housing, immigration, and healthcare.
And why those issues in particular?
Well, housing is a very hot and broad topic that applies to a lot of Canadians, myself included. It's having access to affordable housing, having access to first-time home buyers, having access to the property ladder is important. Now, all the major parties have put forward their plans, and I feel like they're addressing the problem at least a little bit. But I feel like Mr. Carney's plan, the Liberal Party's plan, Build Canada Homes, is tackling the problem head on. However, unfortunately, I don't believe they would be able to build that amount of houses that they're proposing in that short period of time.
So it sounds like you've made up your mind about which party is going to get your vote. You're voting Liberal, is that right?
Yes, I'm leaning towards voting Liberal. This is a complicated election, in my opinion, because yes, we've had problems with healthcare, immigration, and housing for a while now. It's not something that came upon us overnight. However, particularly in this election, I feel like the problem of our former ally to the south of our borders and the trade war that they've enacted upon us is going to overshadow everything else at this stage. I feel like Mr. Carney's resume highlights I feel more confidently in his ability to lead us through that trade war than any other candidate from any other party.
Let me talk to you about a couple of issues you raised that are really important to you in this election, where the Liberals, not under Prime Minister Carney or Liberal leader Carney, they have been criticized on. One is how immigration has moved forward in this country. Yeah. You would know some of that experience as an immigrant yourself, but also healthcare, that especially after COVID, we saw the real major gaps in our universal healthcare system, and that perhaps it isn't all that universal. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare is a big one. Unfortunately, we don't have. There's lots of countries in this world, and lots of countries have both universal healthcare and private healthcare at the same time. You have an option to choose. With the Conservative government, I am worried that we would be starting to move towards private healthcare, eliminating universal healthcare altogether. But the problem is it's underfunded. It's a provincial issue, and the federal government is supposed to provide support to the provincial governments to fund the healthcare system, to hire more nurses, to provide more incentives for doctors to go for doctors to work, for students to go into medical school and graduate and then stay in Canada to work and not leave to the States or somewhere else to practice medicine. I don't have a health doctor myself. I feel there's over 1 million people in Ontario that do not have access to a family doctor. And I feel like, that's a big one that needs to be addressed. And I feel like if it wasn't for the trade war, I would probably be leaning towards voting NDP because I feel like they're tackling the healthcare problem a little more efficiently. However, in this particular case, the Liberal government is still proposing some kind of a platform for healthcare. But I'm just worried that the Conservative government would start moving away from universal healthcare, in my opinion.
Okay. Fedor Kozhenenko, thank you very much for your time today. And again, congratulations on becoming a citizen and for your first vote.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take care. And a reminder that CBC News Network is now free to watch for the remainder of the federal election campaign. In fact, we're going to remain free until May the 5th. You can watch Canada's #1 news network through your cable provider, or you can go online for CBC Gem, CBCNews.ca, or on the CBC News app. We'll be back in just a moment.
hatch now is open at 6:28 a.m. Central Time, 7:28 a.m. Eastern Time, as the International Space Station flew over the South Pacific.
That is the moment the latest crew members arrived on board the International Space Station earlier today. 2 Russian cosmonauts and a NASA astronaut arrived on a Soyuz spacecraft launched from Kazakhstan. They docked with the space station after a couple of orbits around the Earth just 3 hours after liftoff. The new crew will carry out dozens of experiments during an 8-month stay. Parts of Ontario are getting a blast of wintry weather today. Temperatures today could feel like -15 in Toronto, and that could make for one of the coldest April days on record. This also brought an icy morning commute for drivers in the city. Earlier today, there was a multi-vehicle crash on the Don Valley Parkway. Wow, look at that. It had to be closed in one direction for several hours for de-icing, and that wasn't the only crash in the area. Police are warning drivers about icy roads and blowing snow. And you are looking live at Vancouver. Next hour, this is where NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is going to speak at a campaign event. And at the same time, elsewhere in British Columbia, Liberal Party leader Mark Carney is going to deliver his remarks. He's going to be in Delta, BC. We're going to carry both those events for you right here on CBC News Network. And if they get underway at the same time, don't worry. We'll play the first one first, and we'll play back the next one. You're not going to miss a thing. Just stay tuned right here on CBC News Network. Hello, I'm Natasha Fatah. Welcome inside the CBC Newsroom. We are nearly halfway through the federal election campaign, and party leaders are busy making stops right across the country, trying to get their messages out to voters. Liberal Party leader Mark Carney is expected to make an announcement this hour in Delta, BC. And we're also expecting to hear shortly from NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. He's going to be in Vancouver. And just a short while ago, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre spoke in Edmonton. He pledged to crack down on tax havens. And he said if elected Prime Minister, he's going to name an economic task force that would close loopholes which allow people to store money in offshore accounts.
We will target tax havens, expose offshore fortunes, and bring the money home. All of this with the goal of reducing the tax burden on the people in this country. We'll do so with lower taxes for people like these great Canadians behind me. We're going to put them first for a change. We're going to cut income tax for the average worker by 15%. We're going to, so that their hard work actually pays off and they bring home more of each dollar they earn.
CBC's Julia Wong joins us now from Ottawa. She was listening in to Pierre Poilievre's comments. So what else did he have to say, Julia?
Well, Natasha, Poilievre is really emphasizing how he believes Canadians are getting squeezed, that they're paying too many taxes. And this is a message that will very much resonate where he is right now in Edmonton, in the West, where people generally don't like paying too many taxes. He says that the global elites are dodging taxes, and this is having ripple effects on everyday Canadians. So what he is saying is that he will name an economic task force, which you alluded to earlier, which will close loopholes that allow companies to stash their money offshore. He will also direct the CRA to, instead of going after charities or small businesses, to then go after international tax evaders, with the ultimate goal to be collecting an extra $1 billion a year from those international tax havens. He will also create a public name and shame registry so that those names would be out there in the public for every Canadian to see, so that multinational tax dodgers are named and exposed. And he also said that he would expand the offshore tax informant program, which will give whistleblowers up to 20% of the recovered funds when they expose illegal tax schemes. Now, this is very much a clear dig at Liberal leader Mark Carney, who he mentioned several times during his announcement. Poilievre said that Carney's company avoided taxes and put money in Bermuda. Now, to be clear, these were not personal investments, but these were investment funds that Carney oversaw during his time with Brookfield Asset Management, funds that were registered in Bermuda where there are tax advantages. Now, other party leaders have in the past criticized Carney for this move, saying that less tax paid in Canada ultimately means less money for Canadian infrastructure and for the needs that everyday Canadians have. And Carney has previously said that those taxes were paid in Canada, but by Canadian entities. Poilievre very much hoping to capitalize on some of those sentiments out west towards the Liberals, towards their new leader, Mark Carney. And we saw that very much put into play yesterday at a large rally that was held south of Edmonton, where we saw thousands and thousands of people crowded there to see Poilievre. And not only to see Poilievre, but to see former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who was on hand, who was present there to endorse Poilievre in this election campaign. Now, Harper, during his time on the stage, said that Poilievre has the energy and the youth, so there, another dig at Mark Carney, to lead. And he said that the problems that are affecting Canada and Canadians right now are not necessarily only created by U.S. President Donald Trump, but they were created by the federal Liberals. So it was very much a large rally, and Poilievre said that this was probably one of the largest in decades. And he said that he believes that this represents people's desire for real change. So Poilievre will continue to be in Edmonton for the next little while. He has another photo opportunity in a different part of the city, and then he will be heading to Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario later today.
Okay, let's turn our attention to this hour because we're expecting to hear from both the Liberal leader and the NDP leader, both of them scheduled for 12:30 p.m. Eastern. But as I mentioned to the audience earlier, we are going to play both their comments, just depends on who goes first, and then we'll play the other leaders' comments after. But what should we be listening for when they make their stops today?
So we know that Carney was in BC yesterday, and as you mentioned, obviously there today, and we know that he will be in Delta to make an announcement that we expect will be related to housing. So obviously housing and housing affordability, being able to access housing is something that is very much top of mind for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We saw yesterday him responding to that volatility that we're seeing in the stock market because of this ongoing trade war with the United States. He was saying that the risk of a recession in the United States has gone up, and there would obviously be some ripple effects for Canada if that were to happen. And while he emphasized, this isn't something Canada can control. Canada cannot control the United States. It can control the actions of U.S. President Donald Trump, but he did emphasize that Canada is prepared. Take a listen. And apologies, we don't have that clip there for you, but we do know that after his announcement in BC, he will be headed to Calgary for a rally. So interesting to note that both him and Poilievre holding rallies in Alberta. As for the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, he is also in the Vancouver area today, and he'll be making an announcement there. We know that the polls have not been in the NDP's favor as of late. We know that there could be a struggle for Singh to hold on to his seat. So his time there will very much try to ensure that he can hang on to his riding. We've seen a shift in language from the NDP leader over the last little while, where that language previously used to be, I'm going to be the next prime minister. More recently, we've been hearing, I would be honored to serve as prime minister. So a shift in language, a shift in tone. We know that Singh will be spending the day in Vancouver, so we'll hear from him quite shortly.
CBC's Julia Wong in Ottawa. Thank you. And as you heard there, Liberal leader Mark Carney is in BC, where he's going to make those announcements at 12:30 Eastern Time, and that's 9:30 Pacific. We're going to bring those to you live once again as soon as they get underway. But in the meantime, let's turn to Liberal strategist Carlene Varayan. She's also an Associate Vice President of Summa Strategies, a public affairs firm. Carlene, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me back.
So we've got Mark Carney still out west, still in British Columbia. Let's talk about the importance of Western voters, particularly for the Liberal Party.
Well, I am one. As somebody who was born and raised in Saskatchewan and who is also a Liberal, who's worked for this party and volunteered for this party for 25 years, I like to think I can speak on this topic. One thing that's interesting about this election is actually that this is the first time in more than a generation, I think, that both of the two major political party leaders are people born and raised in the West, and both from Alberta, in fact. There is no question that Western Canada is an economic center of gravity for Canada, and that will continue to be the case for a very long time to come, whether it's about the crops that we grow in the ground or the resources that we pull out, like oil and gas and the mining sector. This is a major economic powerhouse, and it doesn't always get the attention that would perhaps reflect the size of that economic power. Just to give you an example, the size of the agriculture industry in Canada is 3 times the size of the auto sector. But you wouldn't necessarily know that from the amount of attention and coverage given to the auto sector at a time like this, when it's directly threatened by tariffs by President Trump. So the West, I think, has always had a bit of a chip on its shoulder when it comes to feeling that it's given the attention that it deserves from Central Canada, and where decisions are made in the nation's capital, in Ottawa, where I'm speaking to you today from. But both leaders spending some time out there for this long a period in the middle of an election campaign that's very consequential, I think tells you that they both understand that.
Okay, so I love how you set this up, that it's this economic powerhouse, a center of gravity economically for the country, even though it doesn't get the recognition that it should. And we've certainly heard that from guests that we've spoken to, whether it's from agriculture or other industries out west, that they feel Ottawa ignores them. Nevertheless, support has tended to go conservative, federally speaking, and in certain pockets in the West, they've gone NDP. The Liberals have lagged. So what does Carney need to say to get people on board?
Yeah, I think he needs to do 2 things. So the first part is keep doing what you're doing, which is saying the same thing to people in every part of the country that you travel to, which is, here is my plan for how I'm going to guide Canada through the economic turmoil that Donald Trump is wreaking on us, for this tariff war that none of us asked for. I think that he's doing a very good job of being portraying a calm, cool, decisive demeanor of somebody who has the background and experience to guide a country through a crisis. So he needs to keep doing that. I think the other thing that Mark Carney needs to do in order to help ensure that the Liberals are successful in Prairie Canada this election is ensure that Prairie people see and believe that they will have a seat at the table in his government. And part of what he needs to do that is put forward a really impressive slate of candidates. And I think that he's done that. He's got people like the current mayor of Edmonton, Amarjeet Sohi, who is running for a seat on Mark Carney's ballot ticket in Edmonton. You've got in northern Saskatchewan the longest serving MLA in the province's history, Buckley Blanchet, running for the Liberal seat in the northern part of Saskatchewan. So people like that who bring a lot of experience, who are well known to people in their communities, and being able to tell Prairie Canadians that that they will have a voice in Ottawa is really important for him to be able to do.
And last night, again in Western Canada, we had Pierre Poilievre have this huge rally. The numbers seem quite large, thousands and thousands of people out there, and a pretty significant political player, Stephen Harper, who stayed out of the political limelight for the past couple of federal elections, coming forward this time, giving a ringing endorsement to Pierre Poilievre, but also making that critical comment that, listen, both these guys once worked for me, and actually, I'm the guy that got us out of the economic crisis of 2008, even though Mark Carney has often taken responsibility for that as he was the governor of the Bank of Canada. I wondered how much impact those comments will have on Carney and if he needs to respond to them.
I think it would be more of a news story if the Conservatives couldn't put together a massive crowd in their bedrock of Alberta. I think that I expected to see a very big event. They delivered one, and though I've worked on many national campaigns, those are hard events to pull off with those big numbers of people. So kudos to the campaign organizers. They did a fantastic job. It's also a pretty standard play from the playbook for a political party to bring out a former prime minister to speak and endorse the leader. I know as the Liberal Party, we've done that a lot with Jean Chrétien. We usually try to get him out on the hustings once or twice in every election campaign and speak to the legacy. So I think those are all pretty obvious moves for the Conservatives, and they're smart. They're the right thing to do. They need to shore up their vote, and not just their vote, but the sense of excitement and momentum that Conservative supporters have in a place like Alberta, because that's where volunteers come from. That's also where party supporters who donate money that helps fund the campaign in other parts of the country come from. So these are all really important things. I think the questions of trading barbs about legacies are also something that you always see in election campaigns. The Liberals, for their part, will often talk about how Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin were the ones that balanced the budget after Conservative Brian Mulroney left the books in a shambles in 1993. So, I think these are tactics that both parties engage in, but certainly a strong showing for Poilievre in Alberta. And it'll be very interesting, actually, I think, to see what Mark Carney is able to pull off in a city like Calgary, which is not a very Liberal-friendly place, where he'll be having a rally tonight.
Okay, and we'll certainly be watching. Carleen Varayan, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And a reminder that CBC News Network is now free to watch for the remainder of the federal election campaign. In fact, we're going to stay free until May the 5th. You can watch Canada's #1 news network through your cable provider, or you can go online on CBC Gem, CBCNews.ca, or you can check out the CBC News app. Okay, let's turn once again to the fallout from U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. After 3 days of global market meltdowns, investors seem to be breathing a sigh of relief. Most of the major indexes have started the day in the green, and some have even erased their losses from yesterday. This comes as the U.S. Trade Representative says more than 50 countries have approached him to begin individual trade negotiations. CBC's Anis Hadari is tracking the latest developments for us. Anis, what are you seeing so far?
I've got the market boards right up in front of me here. I just keep hitting refresh to make sure that we've got the latest numbers. But as you said, Natasha, there's a lot more green on our charts today than there were not just yesterday, but over the past few days. If we look at the Dow Jones and the Toronto Stock Exchange, they're both up today, certainly compared to yesterday, and compared to where they started this morning. Now, I think it's important to point out that while we are seeing, green, those positive numbers, increases for most of the major market indexes in North America, they are just recovering from the losses that they saw yesterday and the volatility that they saw yesterday. The Dow Jones, or the New York Stock Exchange, it's up a little bit more than 2%, but most of that is just recovering to where it was at the end of or I should say at the beginning of yesterday. It's the same thing with the Toronto Stock Exchange. We are not seeing a recovery of the big losses that we had on Thursday and Friday. So while this is good news for investors and people who are watching their portfolios carefully, whether they are, people like you and me just with an RSP or big institutions, we have not regained the money that the markets lost over the last week. There's still a lot of uncertainty for traders in that. And we see similar things happening in the overseas markets. If we look at London, Frankfurt, and Paris, all of those are up by similar amounts today, but it is a similar story overseas. We have not recovered in the markets the amounts that we lost on Thursday and Friday. We are just really settling in to maybe a lack of volatility more than anything else. Yesterday was a bit of a roller coaster going up and down after various rumors and debunking of rumors and statements from the White House. And today things seem to have settled as to where they were at the end of Friday, Natasha.
So we've got all of this turbulence which has been sparked by Donald Trump, his call for reciprocal tariffs against countries that he says is treating the United States unfairly. Have any of the things the president has done, is upset about, have they changed?
Not really. There's been some discussions about them. Certainly the big change was that after Donald Trump's main tariffs were announced on Wednesday, China announced its own, and that's what really started things to go downhill on a lot of the markets. But since then, Friday and Monday, we've heard rumors. We've seen some discussions from various countries. There's been talk about changes from Vietnam. There's delegations from South Korea heading to the White House and discussions there, but nothing substantial that says, okay, these tariffs are off, these tariffs are on. Just a lot of the uncertainty that we've seen has continued. But for some reason, the markets believe that maybe things are at least settling and they don't need to worry quite so much. But honestly, there remains a lot of confusion about what exactly the United States wants. Take a listen to what one expert had to say.
There's a deep mistake in Trump's understanding of trade policy where he thinks it's like a profit and loss statement. And if you buy more stuff from someone than they buy from you, they're ripping you off. The absurdity of this is, of course, I buy more stuff from my local supermarket than it buys from me, but there's no sense in which it's ripping me off. It's a fundamental Econ 101 mistake. I've met undergraduates who've made this mistake.
So, I mean, as you can hear from that economist, there's a little bit of a bafflement from many experts around what exactly Donald Trump wants. When he talks about trade deficits, trade imbalances, and unfairness from other countries, there remains a lot of uncertainty. I hate using that word so much, but we just don't have another one. There's so much confusion around what the United States actually wants because at least with conventional economic theory, what the United States says it wants doesn't make sense to many of the experts out there. So it's really hard to predict what's coming and whether anything actually is settled. But at least as far as the markets are concerned, they seem a little more stable today, if not positive. Natasha.
CBC's Anis Hadari. Thanks so much, Anis.
You're welcome.
And as we've been reporting, Asian markets recovered somewhat from yesterday's steep losses. Now, again, this comes as the U.S. president is posting and boasting about great deals in the works with Asian allies. Here's some of what Trump posted earlier in the day about a great call with South Korea's president. We talked about their tremendous and unsustainable surplus tariffs, shipbuilding, Trump says, adding, and payment for the big-time military protection we provide to South Korea. He goes on to write, China also wants to make a deal badly. But they don't know how to get it started. We are waiting for their call. Now, despite that social media post, it appears Beijing is not blinking in the face of Trump's threats for a further 50% tax on Chinese imports. China is taking the dispute to the World Trade Organization and vowing to, quote, fight to the end. This comes a day after one of the worst days in decades on the Asia-Pacific markets. Journalist Laura Westbrook is in Hong Kong.
The Hang Seng Index rose 1.5% during trading Tuesday after Hong Kong led losses in the region on Monday, with the Hang Seng Index plummeting 13%, its steepest decline since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Meanwhile, China's CSI 300 index climbed 1.7%, and Japan's Nikkei 225 index rose 6%, rebounding from an 18-month low on Monday. This comes after President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba held a phone call in which the leaders agreed to open negotiations. Elsewhere, markets in Thailand, Taiwan and Indonesia fell. And we have seen some extraordinary moves over the past few days, with the trade wars igniting fears of a global economic slowdown. And there is still a lot of uncertainty, with some analysts saying it's too early to say that we've turned a corner. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has threatened a new 50% tariff on China if it doesn't remove its retaliatory 34% tariffs. That would effectively double duties to more than 100% on goods shipped from China to the U.S. China's Ministry of Commerce has hit back, saying the U.S. threat to escalate tariffs on China is a mistake on top of a mistake, which once again exposed the blackmailing nature of the United States. And if the U.S. insists on its own way, China will fight to the end. Well, I've been speaking to some Hong Kongers on the streets today, and one man told me that while he is proud to see China standing up to Donald Trump, he also expressed his hope that both sides will come to the negotiating table. But for now, it appears neither side is backing down. Laura Westbrook for CBC News, Hong Kong.
So with those new threats to China and Beijing not backing down, the tariff crisis is only deepening. Add to this the punishing tariffs on dozens of other countries that come into effect after the stroke of midnight tonight. Right now, a U.S. Senate committee is looking for accountability from the Trump administration. The U.S. Trade Representative is answering some, at times, heated questions. CBC's Katie Nicholson is in Washington, and she's following the story for us. What have you heard so far, Katie?
Yeah, this is still ongoing. Jamieson Greer really getting grilled this morning by senators on both sides of the aisle. Really tough questions, too, from Republicans. Some more subtly raising their logistical concerns about the implementation of these reciprocal tariffs than others. I would point to the Republican senator from Oklahoma here asking Greer what the U.S. plans to do in the short term for clothing retailers. He points out, James Langford, that the U.S. really doesn't have a massive garment manufacturing industry, and so much of it is made overseas. Companies like Target and Walmart, he brings up, have contracts with a lot of countries in those nations that are about to be heavily, heavily tariffed. So here's a little bit of Senator Langford sort of asking what the solution here is for that corner of the market, at least in the short term. Because remember, the whole premise of this is, we're going to bring manufacturing, or one of the premises that the White House keeps saying is they're going to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. Well, that doesn't happen overnight, right? So what are you supposed to do in the short term when you have a need for clothing that is served by Asian markets that will be heavily tariffed? Here's a little bit of that exchange there.
So in the short term, there's no exemptions that are coming on it. So for companies that are currently buying from Asia at this point, whether it be for textiles, whatever it may be, the goal is to be able to push them out of Asia into the Western Hemisphere, or where do they need to go at this point?
Well, the president has been clear again that he's not doing exemptions or exceptions in the near term. My own sense is, given the tariff differentials between Asia and Western Hemisphere, I think people can start making decisions based on that.
There's also a sort of pointed pushback on what the administration's plan is if the market starts to tank or crash and inflation gets out of hand. And here is a little of that sort of exchange between Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan and Jamieson Greer.
Ambassador Greer, would the administration reverse course if the president's tariffs led to 10% inflation?
Senator, the president is fixed in his purpose. This trade deficit and the offshoring and loss of manufacturing jobs is something that's persisted for too long, and it's dangerous.
Now, at one point, U.S. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada asked Greer why the 70 countries that are now reaching out to the White House to try and open some sort of trade negotiations should trust that the U.S. hold up to any agreements. And, of course, she is not the first senator this morning to sort of point to Kuzma as well. So, again, there's a lot of pushback around can these nations actually trust the U.S. to be a trusted broker, a trusted sort of trade partner. Greer has been really pushing the White House line that, of course, the tariffs are going to boost domestic revenue and manufacturing and eliminate the trade deficit. And he is insisting that these measures are needed now. There is an urgent rebalancing, he says, needed of the world trade system. The senators are all mostly in agreement. Yes, it's good to review foreign trade agreements. Yes, it's good to try to get a better deal for the American people. But the real issue that keeps coming up is how exactly the Trump administration is implementing these issues, and that it's really the criticisms are coming around how the Trump administration is going about this sort of, as one senator suggested, needless pain to the consumer. One other thing I just mentioned just before I sat down here, Greer happened to mention that costs from tariffs rarely get down to the consumer. That was another point that he insisted upon this, and I would say that in a copy of his prepared remarks this morning, he again said that this was a moment that was needed of drastic and overdue change. This messaging, whether it's going to hit home, he certainly has been grilled throughout the morning. This is continuing. And then he's going to face another day of this tomorrow when he sits down before the House Ways and Means Committee, having to sort of answer to some of those more broad criticisms around this tariff plan. And in that case, it'll be after these reciprocal tariffs kick in and start to be felt across the Asian and European markets.
Really interesting, Katie, that simultaneously he's saying consumers will have to make their own choices based on the tariffs that start hitting clothes manufacturers in Asia, but at the same time saying, well, individual consumers don't get hit with the tariffs. So he seems to be sort of arguing with himself there. But we'll see what happens over the course of the day. CBC's Katie Nicholson in Washington. Thank you. Representatives from Iran and the United States are set to meet this weekend in Oman, and on the agenda is going to be Iran's nuclear program. U.S. President Donald Trump says if the talks are not successful, Iran is going to be in great danger. We'll bring you a full report coming up right here on CBC News Network. It's been an ugly commute for people in Toronto. There have been multiple collisions because of the slippery conditions due to black ice. CBC's Clara Pasica is on the streets of Toronto and joins us now live. Clara, I got to tell you, when I woke up this morning, I shrieked. Like, what is happening? We did not anticipate this kind of snow, and the commute in, the walk in was very icy and slippery, but it's a whole other situation when you're talking about drivers. What have you seen so far?
Absolutely. Well, I'm here on Richmond Street, just a few meters away from the Don Valley Parkway. And this hill behind me, I can tell you, was very treacherous. Obviously, you might be fooled now seeing the sun out here, but that certainly wasn't the case around 7:30, 8 in the morning. We actually witnessed a tanker truck on this hill that just completely spun out. Another vehicle also involved emergency personnel attending the scene. And just here while we're standing in the parking lot here of this gas station, we saw multiple emergency vehicles going every which direction. Another really significant collision on the Don Valley Parkway. This involved 6 different vehicles. We spoke to Toronto police who attended that scene. Have a listen.
When officers did arrive on scene, they did report back that the roads were very icy due to black ice. The DVP was closed for quite some time due to de-icing. However, thankfully the roads have been reopened at this point, and we're just asking people to slow down and drive with care today.
So that Don Valley Parkway closing had, really significant delays. It has been reopened. Some other streets also closed that have since been reopened.
What are you hearing from the drivers out there today?
Well, I've reported in lots of different places in this country, and we do know that people do sometimes make fun of Torontonians for not being able to handle a little bit of snow. But I do have to say that these were really, really slippery, really unexpected conditions. People were coming into this gas station saying they had just spun out, really just shocked at different things that they had experienced. They were coming in here just to kind of catch their breath. We actually saw some really tender moments of people who didn't even seem to really know each other, but just offering some kind words to each other. There was actually a man who was giving out granola bars and pop to people who had just come to just, slow their quickening heart, really. But have a listen to what some of these drivers are telling me this morning.
I got my snow tires removed last month thinking that it was spring. I guess it's not. So I'm probably going to be staying in today until I know that the roads are okay to drive on.
It took me 2 hours to go 20 minutes. What's normally a 20-minute drive, so wasn't super thrilled about that. But yeah, just watching my gas tank go lower and lower, and I was like, please just make it to a gas station.
I thought that winter finished already.
Where the trucks putting down salt. I mean, they should have been out last night, and the road shouldn't be covered in ice like this.
So the amazing thing is, despite these two, really significant fender benders, and there were others, there were no serious injuries reported here. Toronto city crews are now working to get more salt down in more parts of the city to make the afternoon commute a little easier and a little less slick.
CBC's Clara Pasica in Toronto. Thank you, Clara. And here's a look at some of the shots from Ottawa today. The capital city and the surrounding area are set to get anywhere from 10 to 20 centimeters of snow today. Environment Canada is warning that visibility might suddenly be reduced. Drivers are also being warned to take the proper precautions. You're watching CBC News Network. As promised, let's take you to Vancouver, where NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is speaking.
Working with Mark Carney to open up the Canadian housing market for more big money investors from other countries to buy up homes that should be for you and your family. That means fewer homes for you and your family and bigger profits for these speculators and these investors. That's going to make it harder for you to find a home. That is bad news. Imagine you're a young person. Imagine you're a young couple. Imagine you're a family trying to buy your first home. And you find out you're going up against a hedge fund with billions of dollars. You're not going to be able to win that bidding war. And it's going to drive up the costs even more. And so where Mark Carney has not committed to extending the ban on foreign ownership of Canadian-made homes, instead it's going to expire. And so here's our plan. We're going to make it permanent, the ban on big money investors buying up Canadian homes. That should be a ban. Homes in Canada should be for you and your family, not for rich investors to get richer. In addition, we're going to end the loophole that allows speculators to flip homes year after year. That's got to stop. It just drives up the cost of homes and it makes it more expensive and impossible for everyday folks to buy a home. The thing is, we're in it for you. So we're going to put forward ideas that make it easier for you and your family to buy a home. We're not interested in billionaires making lots of money off of housing. We're not interested in investors and speculators driving up the cost of homes. We want to put a stop to that so that you and your family can actually afford a home. Sadly, Mark Carney, he's not in it for you. He's going to let foreign owners buy up Canadian homes. He's going to let people like Bob Rennie and Mark Wiens sell off Canadian homes to the highest bidders. And that means less homes for you, means more profits for them. We're going to fight back. Donc, on est dans une crise.
So we're in a crisis, a very serious housing crisis. And in the middle of this crisis, what we're seeing now is the fact that Mark Carney has candidates like Mark Wiens who are proposing to sell homes in Canada to rich investors in other countries. And we have Bob Rennie, and they're working together. They're working with Mark Carney to sell homes here in Canada to rich investors right around the world. That means fewer homes for you and more profits for them. Speculators and rich investors are not the people we should be defending. We should be defending people. And that's why our plan today is to make permanent a ban on rich investors buying up homes. And what we need to do is keep homes in Canada for Canadians, for you and your family. Unfortunately, Mark Carney is not there for you, and that's why you need New Democrats. And in this election, you have an important choice. If you send a New Democrat to Ottawa, like the candidates with me today, you will have an ally there, someone who is defending your interests.
The question in this election is, who's going to make sure that you and your family can actually afford a home? Who's going to say no to rich investors with deep pockets from other countries buying up homes here in Canada, and instead saying these homes should be left for you and your families, should be for Canadians to buy? And one more thing. We've just learned recently that an American billionaire, owner of Blackstone, has finalized a deal to buy up Canadian telecommunications infrastructure. This is a question of national security. This is fundamentally wrong. We have to defend our Canadian infrastructure, especially telecommunications. Keep it Canadian, keep it ours. We can't let a foreign billionaire, an American billionaire, particularly one who is a supporter and closely connected to Donald Trump, who is attacking our very sovereignty, we can't let him buy up our infrastructure. So I'm calling on Mark Carney today to initiate immediately a review of this purchase based on national security, which would cause for an immediate pause of this sale. We have to defend our country. We have to defend our infrastructure, and that's what New Democrats are going to do.
And finally, I just want to add that there is an American billionaire who is in the process of buying telecommunications infrastructure here in Canada. And I think it's wrong to do that because we should be defending our own Canadian infrastructure against investors from the U.S. and elsewhere who want to buy it. That is our infrastructure. We need to defend it. So today I am asking Mark Carney to begin a review immediately based on our national security, a review of that purchase, and I'm asking him to put a pause on that sale. I think it's more important to defend our country and our infrastructure.
I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Merci beaucoup. On va maintenant passer à la période de questions des journalistes. Une question et une relance par journaliste. We'll now take the questions from the press. One question and one follow-up per journalist. We'll begin with David Baxter, Canadian Press.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. Earlier this morning, we saw Pierre Poilievre talking about how he also would go after offshore tax havens, similar to your policy you announced earlier. Now, we've seen a concerted effort from the Conservatives to go after some of those orange-blue flipper ridings, especially with appeals to more blue-collar workers. With now also talking about this tax policy, are you worried about Poilievre launching a strategy similar to what Doug Ford successfully did in Ontario for the past few elections?
Well, I think more and more Canadians are looking at Pierre Poilievre's plan, his plan to cut the things that you need like healthcare, and how that's going to be bad for them, bad for their families. We're seeing more and more Canadians rejecting Pierre Poilievre's policies, which would hurt our country and hurt Canadian families. But people are also worried about Mark Carney. I'm hearing it more and more. People are saying, you know what, I'm worried about what he's talking about. I'm worried about the cuts he's proposing to healthcare. It's going to be bad for my family. We need investments in healthcare. Healthcare is so important to me. It's such a Canadian value. We want it to be strong. We believe in a healthcare system that's public and universal, and cuts is going to hurt that. So people are worried about that. They're also worried when they learned that he was the chair of a company which was the biggest tax dodger in our country. The fact that he was the chair that approved of decisions to avoid paying taxes. We learned that just in 3 years, Brookfield Investments made $1 billion in profits and paid 0 taxes in 3 years. Throughout the tenure while Mark Carney was the chair, and as you know, the chair approves the decisions made by the CEO. The chair and the board approved that together. That while he was in that position, they avoided paying $5 billion in taxes. And why is this a problem? Well, every amount of money that these big corporations don't pay means less money for investments in housing, means less investments in hiring nurses, doctors, and frontline healthcare workers. It means less public services that we count on. It means that these companies are starving our system, and it's wrong. And then you've got a person who was chair of that just a couple months ago. He was the chair of this company, and they're worried that, well, how is he going to crack down on tax avoidance and these loopholes and offshore tax havens when he was the chair of a company that was one of the biggest tax dodgers? I think those are legitimate concerns that Canadians are raising.
Thank you. Next question, Ashley Berg, CBC.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. Pollster David Coletto suggested that your own riding here is in jeopardy because of how far the NDP has fallen in the polls in BC. Do you have any concerns about winning your own riding?
This is a really important election, and I think there's a really important choice for Canadians right now. We're seeing that folks are rejecting Pierre Poilievre. They're saying, you know, his plan is no good, his plan is going to hurt my family, it's going to hurt my country, and they're saying no to that. But people are looking at Mark Carney and saying, well, you know what, I'm worried about what Mark Carney will do. If you're worried about him and you're saying, I'm worried that Mark Carney is going to cut the things that I care about, I'm worried that he's the chair of a company that engaged in tax avoidance, a tax dodger, that I'm worried about what that means. Re-elect your New Democrat. You re-elect your New Democrat incumbents, elect New Democrats, send more New Democrats to Ottawa, because we're going to stand up and fight for you. If you want someone that's on your side, that's going to say, you know what, no, we're not going to let the things that we care about, the things that were so important to us, be cut, send more New Democrats to Ottawa.
Do you think you can win your own riding?
Absolutely. I'm confident that I'll be able to serve the people of Burnaby Central. And I'm also confident that people in this country need New Democrats. We saw that we were able to deliver things like health care expansions, including dental care and Medicare and medication coverage. We saw that through New Democrats, we were able to deliver things like protections for workers. We were only to be able to do that because you voted for us. You voted for New Democrats and you sent us there, and we were able to fight for you. So if you want those fights to continue, if you want us to stay in there fighting for you and your family, you got to vote for us.
Are you confident that you can win your riding? Yes, I'm confident that I will continue to be able to represent this riding. This is such an important, and there's such an important issue in this election. Who will fight for you? And if you're worried about the cuts proposed by Mark Carney, if you're worried about the fact that he was the chair of a company that avoided paying taxes, if you are afraid, then you should vote for New Democrats and send more New Democrats to Ottawa to defend you.
Mr. Singh, good morning.
It was a Liberal candidate, Talib Mohammed, was endorsed by one of your former caucus members, Murray Rankin. How much does that bother you?
Well, I think it's wrong to suggest that in this time that we need less New Democrats. We need more New Democrats. You know, the things that we're proud of, the things that made our lives better were because New Democrats were there. We saw what New Democrats have done throughout the history of this country. Every program that has made people's lives better, from healthcare to pensions to employment insurance, it's because you voted for New Democrats, you sent us to Ottawa, we got it done. And now, who do you want in Ottawa with all the uncertainty of Donald Trump, with all the attacks on our country? Who do you want there to say, hey, wait, no, don't cut our healthcare. Wait, we got to stand up for working people. They've got to be the priority, not the billionaires. That's New Democrats. That's us. Send more New Democrats to Ottawa, and we will fight for you, as we have before. You voted for us, we brought in dental care. You voted for us, we brought in medication coverage. Now people in BC are going to have free diabetes medication and devices. That's because you voted for us. Voting for New Democrats means we're on your side, we're going to fight for you.
Half your current caucus is from the province of BC. You're here for 2 nights, you're holding no rallies. Do you feel like you can't get the support and people out to support you right now at this time in the campaign?
Not at all. We're focused on events to showcase our policies. We're doing policy announcements. I'll be meeting with different communities, and we're looking forward to showing people the choice they have in this election. Really, it's an important choice. And the question comes down to, if you want someone on your side fighting for you in these uncertain and turbulent times, who's going to always put you and your family first? Who's always going to put workers first? Who's always going to put families and seniors first? That's us. Other guys are interested in the billionaires, they're interested in the CEOs and the big corporations. We're interested in fighting for you.
Si, prochaine question, Valérie Gamache, Radio-Canada.
Hello, Mr. Singh. There are some conservatives saying that sending a Liberal government to Ottawa is, in a way, voting for separation in the West. What do you think of unity in this country? Is it in danger at this time? No, on the contrary. I think there's incredible unity across the country that I've seen since Donald Trump's attacks. I think all Canadians want to defend our country. They're proud to be Canadian. They're proud of our values. And what are our values that say who we are? One value is that we take care of each other, and a universal public health care system. Those are our values. So we have to defend those values. We have to defend who we are. And the way to do that is to elect new Democrats who will defend those values and defend our health care system.
No, in fact, I've seen the opposite. I've seen Canadians coming together in an incredible show of unity. I've seen so many Canadians showing resilience and resistance to the threats of Donald Trump. Canadians saying that, no, we're going to fight back and defend our country and defend our values. And one of those values is that we believe in taking care of each other. That's who we are as Canadians. And the way that we do that, the way we represent that value, is through our universal public health care. And so when you're making a choice in this election, who's going to defend your actual values? The idea of taking care of each other and universal health care. That's a New Democrat.
And one of the new consequences of having Donald Trump in the White House is a new wave of illegal immigrants coming through Roxham Road. Some 200 crossed last week. Now, are you concerned that we could end up with a new crisis involving these people crossing the border illegally? Well, certainly there are problems in that regard, and I think the federal government has to do its share and ensure the resources are there to avoid what happened in the past. We need federal resources made available and all the necessary investments to be made to avoid what we've experienced in the past.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. I just wanted to get your reaction to new Nanos research polling that shows that the NDP has just 8% support and is now at a 25-year low in terms of support for the federal party.
Well, this is an important election, and campaigns matter. So I want you to know, in this election, the choice is really important. That we've got all this uncertainty from Donald Trump and his attacks on workers, attacks on people. Who's going to stand up and defend your values? Who's going to say, you know what, I'm not going to let Mark Carney cut our health care. I'm not going to let Mark Carney let rich investors with deep pockets from other countries buy up homes that should go to Canadians. We're the only ones talking about those things. We're the only ones who are going to stand up for you. So send more New Democrats to Ottawa to defend the things that you care about that matter to you.
Do you feel that you've had enough of a presence in BC during this election campaign so far to show that the specific issues that matter to British Columbians are a top priority for you?
Well, we've got a number of weeks that remain, and so we're going to make sure we spend our time across this country. Of course, we've got a huge country, so we're trying to get everywhere and let people know that they've got a choice in this election. And for folks that are really worried, they're saying, you know what, I'm pretty sure that we're rejecting Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, but I'm starting to get more and more worried about the cuts that Mark Carney's talking about. I'm worried about the fact that, you know, he was the chair of a company that profited off the housing crisis. I don't think he's going to be the one that will help fix the housing crisis. If you're someone that's worried about those things, re-elect your New Democrat MP, elect more New Democrats, send them to Ottawa, and we'll stand up and fight for you.
Thank you. Last question. Tell us your name and your media, please.
It's Joanne Lee Young from the Vancouver Sun. Mr. Singh, can you comment on the housing plan? How realistic is it? What will the major challenges be? How will you engage developers?
Yeah, we've laid out a broad plan with a number of different steps. And so just to kind of summarize some of the elements of it, one is we believe that the federal land that we have across this country can be used to build homes that are affordable, and that we should use all of our federal land to build 100% affordable homes. Unlike the other parties that are talking about selling off that land to developers and most of it not being affordable, I think that's wrong. We should keep it public, keep it owned by the people, and build affordable homes. We also know that we've got to build homes through private development. And to support that, we've laid out a fund. We're going to make the Housing Accelerator Fund, which has been working. We're going to double the amount there and make it permanent, call it the Canadian Homes Transfer. We're also going to help with the building of the infrastructure in municipalities. A lot of municipalities are ready to build homes, but they don't have the infrastructure, the water, the sewage, the other connections needed to build more homes. So we're proposing a community first fund that would actually build up the infrastructure necessary to build more homes. We're also today talking about how we keep the homes that are built for Canadians, for families, for people here instead of for rich investors. So that's making the ban on big money investors from foreign countries that are buying up Canadian homes, to make that permanent, to make that ban permanent, so people can actually afford a home. We're going to fight hard to make sure that people can actually afford a home. This is something really important to me. We've seen that the other parties haven't shown the same commitment to prioritizing people instead of rich investors. We're in it for you. We're always going to propose plans that make you the priority.
We've been taking you to Vancouver, where NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has been presenting another campaign policy announcement during this federal election campaign. CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian joins us now live from Ottawa. He's been listening in. So, Rafi, the big takeaways for you as we see Jagmeet Singh out there in Western Canada?
Natasha, one thing that struck me right away is his hesitation in answering that question from our colleague Ashley Burke about whether or not he's worried about keeping his own seat. The first time he was asked the question, he kind of didn't really go there in his answer. He said, things about Mark Carney and about Pierre Poilievre as Liberal and Conservative rivals. Ashley went back at it a second time, asked, polling data is showing you could be in danger of losing your own seat. And then he said, no, he's confident he'll win it. He's confident he'll be able to stay on as representative for Burnaby South. I do note that they chose Vancouver to talk about a housing policy, which is tactical on their part. Polling does show that BC remains the province where, Trump is an important factor in this election, President Donald Trump and the tariffs, but that housing affordability is also top of mind for voters, perhaps rivaling or even exceeding the U.S. question. So small surprise that this is where the NDP made their housing announcement. Now, will that allow them to punch through the noise in this increasingly kind of polarized, bipartisan sort of election campaign we're seeing? Well, that's the big question for them. Singh was in a new riding, this riding of Vancouver, Fraserview, Burnaby South did not exist prior to 2025. Now they're up against former Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson. That's who's running for the Liberals in this riding. So they've got quite a fight on their hands there. I was also struck by Singh sort of repeatedly suggesting that Mark Carney has some questions to answer about his time at Brookfield, and kind of trying to use that as a talking point to differentiate himself from the Liberal leader. Clearly, he's sort of struggling to make himself that
right,
space
Rafi, we're going to have to leave it there.
Campaign. And it's funny he got that
CBC's
question
Rafi
about whether or not he
in
could
Ottawa.
lose in his own writing.
Hello, I'm Andrew Nichols. This is CBC News Network, and this is The Scene live in Delta, British Columbia. We are waiting to hear from Liberal leader Mark Carney. He will make an announcement and then take questions. We will bring that to you. Tariffs and an unpredictable U.S. president continue to disrupt the election cycle here at home. We're about 3 weeks out from Election Day. Advance polling starts next week on the 18th, and leaders and their parties are racing to get their message out. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian is tracking today's developments. He joins us live from our Ottawa bureau. So, Rafi, where are the leaders and what are they up to?
Well, Andrew, many of them are out west, as you noted. We're waiting to hear from Mark Carney in Delta. Jagmeet Singh is not too far from him. He was in the newly created Vancouver riding of Vancouver, Fraser View, Burnaby South. Pierre Poilievre, also out west, in Alberta, though, in Edmonton. And as for Yves-François Blanchet of the Bloc Québécois, he actually campaigned right here in Ottawa this morning because he wanted to focus on some Supreme Court issues. We listened to Jagmeet Singh just a while ago announce his new housing policy, how he intends to dedicate all of the public land that's available for affordable housing to build affordable homes rather than just a percentage as his conservative liberal rivals are proposing. Singh was also asked some pointed questions about whether he could stand to lose his own riding, as some polling suggests. The first time he kind of avoided answering that question directly. Have a listen to what happened the second time he was asked.
Absolutely. I'm confident that I'll be able to serve the people of Burnaby Central. And I'm also confident that people in this country need New Democrats. We saw that we were able to deliver things like health care expansions, including dental care and Medicare, and medication coverage. We saw that through New Democrats, we were able to deliver things like protections for workers. So if you want those fights to continue, if you want us to stay in there fighting for you and your family, you got to vote for us.
A bit of a common theme among the opposition party leaders. There were a lot of attacks on Mark Carney today, and that would probably be because he's ahead in so many opinion polls at this point. Pierre Poilievre, speaking to journalists, kind of went there of his own volition without even being asked questions about that. Here's what Poilievre had to say about Carney's business dealings at Brookfield.
Mr. Carney is not a businessman. He is a political grifter. He has used his political influence to rip off workers and seniors. And now, with all the political power of a prime minister, he continues to be invested in the same company, Brookfield, the same company that benefits by raising inflation, by raising energy prices, and by ripping off workers and seniors.
So some harsh words there, no doubt something Carney will be asked about during his news conference, which we're expecting any moment now. Poilievre is coming off a rally last night in Edmonton where thousands attended. The party itself is saying 15,000, not a number CBC has independently verified. And he was introduced there by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who has officially endorsed him, of course. Harper doesn't tend to get into election campaigns a whole lot. He's not done this in 2019 or in 2021. This time he decided not to sit this out. I asked Yves-François Blanchet of the Bloc Québécois about that at his own news conference earlier today, about what kind of impact that could have. Have a listen to what Blanchet had to say.
Yesterday, the Conservatives had a pretty large rally in Edmonton. Thousands of people were there. Stephen Harper, the former Prime Minister, showed up to back Pierre Poilievre. What kind of impact do you think Stephen Harper's presence could have on this election campaign?
He should come in Quebec. He would help us.
So perhaps a bit of a glib response there, Andrew. As you probably picked up, that was outside. It's quite a snowy day in Ottawa. Blanchet had quite a few supporters show up, regardless, in a city where he obviously runs no candidates, being the Bloc Québécois. He actually had more supporters out at this event than he did when we went during the first week to Belleuil, Quebec, which is where he runs as a candidate. I asked him about that and about whether he's worried that he could lose his own riding, much like Jagmeet Singh. There are polls out there showing that Blanchet could be in trouble there. He brushed it off, and he said that when he was in Belleuil, that was not really an event he'd advertised. He was only there to submit his own nomination papers, and he insisted he's not concerned.
Rafi, thank you. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian in our Ottawa bureau. Turning now to the fallout from U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. After 3 days of global market meltdowns, investors seem to be breathing a sigh of relief as trading turns positive. The turnaround comes as the U.S. Trade Representative says more than 50 countries have approached him to begin trade negotiations. The CBC's Anis Hadari is tracking the latest developments for us. He joins us live from Calgary. So, Anis, what are we seeing so far?
We're seeing a lot more green on the markets today than we certainly saw yesterday or on Thursday and Friday. If we take a look at the Dow Jones, the New York Stock Exchange, and onto the Toronto Stock Exchange, both of those are showing some increases today. Although, as we speak, the numbers keep changing. Overall, the Toronto Stock Exchange is doing a little bit better than it was in previous days. Today, when we look right now at the New York Stock Exchange, it's up just a little bit over 1%. It is important to contextualize these increases that we're seeing in the markets today, the stability that we're seeing in the markets today, doesn't make up for the big drops that we saw on Thursday and Friday. So what we are seeing right now today when we talk about the markets doing a little bit better is that really they've stabilized given the big roller coasters that we saw both earlier this week and last week. European markets as well are, you could say, broadly up today. So really a lot of the roller coasters that we felt across financial markets yesterday, Thursday, and Friday, all stemming out of Donald Trump's tariff threats and warnings of tariffs being applied around the world. Those seem to have settled, but investors, whether it's small retail investors or big broad banks, they haven't started buying in back to where they were before the tariff threats. So we're just seeing things maybe settle a little bit right now. No one thinks that they're going to be making the money that they did, say, early last week, Andrew.
And Anis, all of this turbulence was sparked by what Trump has called reciprocal tariffs against countries that he says are treating the U.S. unfairly. When he says unfairly, he means if there's a trade deficit. Have any of the things that the president is upset about changed?
We haven't seen anything materially change yet. There's certainly been discussion that the United States is entering into negotiations with various countries. Some of them are ones that have pretty heavy tariffs applied to them. Some of them a little bit smaller. Notably, though, we haven't seen a lot of movement with China, and that's the big one in the room here. Realistically, though, what the United States is saying is unfair. The trade deficits. Economists around the world are a little bit unsure on what those negotiations would even be. Take a listen to how one American economist described it.
There's a deep mistake in Trump's understanding of trade policy where he thinks it's like a profit and loss statement. And if you buy more stuff from someone than they buy from you, they're ripping you off. The absurdity of this is, of course, I buy more stuff from my local supermarket than it buys from me, but there's no sense in which it's ripping me off. It's a fundamental Econ 101 mistake. I've met undergraduates who've made this mistake.
So unfortunately, when it's undergraduates making the mistake or when it's the president of the United States that is making what at least that economist says is a mistake, it's hard to predict what is going to come. And so we haven't seen a lot of these things change yet. There is no promise of a trade deficit evaporating. We've seen threats of counter tariffs, but no agreements yet that would account for the markets rescinding the changes that they seem to be putting in place on Monday. But of course, it is always a very fast-moving puck when it comes to what the White House and other international governments are doing with their trade policy these days, Andrew. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Anis, thank you. The CBC's Anis Hadari in Calgary. Now, as we just heard, Asian markets have recovered somewhat from yesterday's steep losses. Earlier today, the U.S. president was posting and boasting about a great deal in the works with South Korea's acting president. He said, "We talked about their tremendous and unsustainable surplus, tariffs, shipbuilding, and payment for the big-time military protection we provide to South Korea." Trump added China also wants to make a deal badly, but they don't know how to get it started. We are waiting for their call. But Beijing is not blinking. In the face of Trump's threats of a further 50% tax on Chinese imports, China is now taking the dispute to the World Trade Organization, vowing to, quote, fight to the end. This comes after yesterday's rout on Asia-Pacific markets. Journalist Laura Westbrook is in Hong Kong.
The Hang Seng Index rose 1.5% during trading Tuesday after Hong Kong led losses in the region on Monday, with the Hang Seng Index plummeting 13%, its steepest decline since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Meanwhile, China's CSI 300 index climbed 1.7%, and Japan's Nikkei 225 index rose 6%, rebounding from an 18-month low on Monday. This comes after President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba held a phone call in which the leaders agreed to open negotiations. Elsewhere, markets in Thailand, Taiwan and Indonesia fell. And we have seen some extraordinary moves over the past few days, with the trade wars igniting fears of a global economic slowdown. And there is still a lot of uncertainty, with some analysts saying it's too early to say that we've turned a corner. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has threatened a new 50% tariff on China if it doesn't remove its retaliatory 34% tariffs. That would effectively double duties to more than 100% on goods shipped from China to the US. China's Ministry of Commerce has hit back, saying the US threat to escalate tariffs on China is a mistake on top of a mistake, which once again exposed the blackmailing nature of the United States. And if the US insists on its own way, China will fight to the end. Well, I've been speaking to some Hong Kongers on the streets today, and one man told me that while he is proud to see China standing up to Donald Trump, he also expressed his hope that both sides will come to the negotiating table. But for now, it appears neither side is backing down. Laura Westbrook for CBC News, Hong Kong.
Now, with those new threats to China and Beijing not backing down, the tariff crisis is only heating up, especially with punishing new levies on dozens of other countries set to take effect at midnight. Earlier today, a U.S. Senate committee met to examine the accountability of the Trump administration, leading to some heated exchanges with the president's trade representative. The CBC's Katie Nicholson has more from Washington.
Jamieson Greer really getting grilled this morning by senators on both sides of the aisle. Really tough questions, too, from Republicans. Some more subtly raising their logistical concerns about the implementation of these reciprocal tariffs than others. I would point to the Republican senator from Oklahoma here asking Greer what the U.S. plans to do in the short term for clothing retailers. He points out, James Langford, that the U.S. really doesn't have a massive garment manufacturing industry, and so much of it is made overseas. Companies like Target and Walmart, he brings up, have contracts with a lot of countries in those nations that are about to be heavily, heavily tariffed. So here's a little bit of Senator Langford sort of asking what the solution here is for that corner of the market, at least in the short term. Because remember, the whole premise of this is, we're going to bring manufacturing, or one of the premises that the White House keeps saying is they're going to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. Well, that doesn't happen overnight, right? So what are you supposed to do in the short term when you have a need for clothing that is served by Asian markets that will be heavily tariffed? Here's a little bit of that exchange there.
So in the short term, there's no exemptions that are coming on it. So for companies that are currently buying from Asia at this point, whether it be for textiles, whatever it may be, the goal is to be able to push them out of Asia into the Western Hemisphere, or where do they need to go at this point?
The president has been clear, again, that he's not doing exemptions or exceptions in the near term. My own sense is, given the tariff differentials between Asia and Western Hemisphere, I think people can start making decisions based on that.
There's also a sort of pointed pushback on what the administration's plan is if the market starts to tank or crash and inflation gets out of hand. And here is a little of that sort of exchange between Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan and Jamieson Greer.
Ambassador Greer, would the administration reverse course if the president's tariffs led to 10% inflation?
Senator, the president is fixed in his purpose. This trade deficit and the offshoring and loss of manufacturing jobs is something that's persisted for too long, and it's dangerous.
Now, at one point, U.S. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada asked Greer why the 70 countries that are now reaching out to the White House to try and open some sort of trade negotiations should trust that the U.S. hold up to any agreements. And, of course, she is not the first senator this morning to sort of point to Kuzma as well. So, again, there's a lot of pushback around can these nations actually trust the U.S. to be a trusted broker, a trusted sort of trade partner. Greer has been really pushing the White House line that, of course, the tariffs are going to boost domestic revenue and manufacturing and eliminate the trade deficit. And he is insisting that these measures are needed now. There is an urgent rebalancing, he says, needed of the world trade system.
We are taking you now to Delta, BC. The Liberal leader is speaking at a factory that. Here's Mark Carney.
And many thanks, as usual, to our exceptional Liberal candidates in British Columbia who are joining us today.
I'm also very pleased that we're joined by Brenda Knights, Vanessa Mountain, and Helen Song from the BC Indigenous Housing Society. And I want to thank Intelligent Cities team for welcoming us to this extraordinary pilot mass timber construction facility. You, Intelligent City, are the future of housing construction in this country. This is exactly the type of innovation that we need to tackle the housing crisis and the economic crisis that has been brought on by President Trump's trade war. See, President Trump is in the process of trying to fundamentally restructure the U.S. economy. And in the process, he is rupturing the global economy. The immediate impact has been sharp falls and ongoing volatility in global financial markets, putting retirement savings at risk. People's livelihoods, from the auto industry in Ontario to the forestry workers here in British Columbia, those livelihoods being put in jeopardy. The U.S. is again targeting the Canadian forestry industry by more than doubling the duties charged on softwood lumber. That decision, as well as with the other Trump tariffs, is unjustified, it is unwarranted, and it's fundamentally misguided. Canadian softwood lumber is integral to building homes across the United States. And the U.S. tariffs will only increase the cost of materials for American builders, and ultimately American homebuyers will pay the price. Nous ne pouvons pas contrôler le président Trump.
We cannot control President Trump, but we can control our own actions. We can control our own destiny. We are masters in our own home. We will respond with force and clear goals. We will fight. We will protect all Canadians, and we will build a strong economy. We will fight with counter tariffs that will have maximum impact on the United States and minimum impact here in Canada.
We will protect Canadian workers and businesses using every single dollar that we collect from our counter tariffs. For workers across the country, my government has already made employment insurance more immediate and more generous. To
support Canadian businesses, we have temporarily postponed tax payments on income as well as remittances of GST and HST. We created new funding facilities to ensure that they have access to more liquidity, and we have increased the funding of regional development agencies.
We recently also invested over $20 million to boost the competitiveness and resiliency of BC's forestry sector. But above all, our response is to build. We will build a new Canadian economy, the strongest economy in the G7. We will build Canada strong. While the U.S. is trying to keep high-quality, sustainable Canadian lumber out, we will use more of it here in our plan to double the pace of housing construction in this country over the course of the next 10 years. This is the most ambitious housing plan since the Second World War. We will build our way out of the housing crisis. We will build our way out of the economic crisis. We will make housing more affordable in Canada once more. Because, as Gregor intimated, today's reality is that even when Canadians, particularly young Canadians, are doing everything right, they're getting a good education, they're studying hard, they're securing a well-paying job, they're saving up, they often barely have enough to pay the rent, let alone to afford a new home. On average, across this country, it takes over 4 years to save for a down payment. For first-time buyers, it's over 6 years. And in markets like Vancouver, much longer. This has been the most expensive housing market in the country for a very long time. So business as usual will not work. The status quo cannot stand. We need a new approach that recognizes that it's time to build. My government will flip the script on housing with a new strategy to build faster, smarter, more affordably, and more sustainably. We will address failures in the housing market head-on, unleashing the power of public-private cooperation at a scale not seen in generations. As I said, our goal is to double the pace of housing construction to almost 500,000 new homes every single year. Homes you can afford to buy. Homes that are more sustainable and cost less to live in. Homes made right here with Canadian ingenuity, Canadian labor, Canadian products, including softwood lumber and mass timber. The first part of our plan is to create a new entity, Build Canada Homes, a lean, mission-driven organization that will act as a developer on new affordable housing projects, get the government back in the business of building affordable homes, including on federal public lands. Build Canada Homes will provide billions of dollars in financing for affordable home builders to construct deeply affordable homes for those most in need, as well as housing for students and seniors. And above all, Build Canada Homes will catalyze an entirely new housing industry with Canadian lumber at the center of it. Look, the way we build homes needs to change. Prefabricated and modular housing are the future. They can drive down time to completion by up to 50%. They can reduce costs by up to 20%, emissions by over 20% compared to traditional construction methods. And Canada should be the world leader in this new industry. And as you can see here, we're already well positioned to do so. And that's why my government will provide $25 billion, I'll repeat, $25 billion in financing to scale the industry up massively, to create high-paying jobs, high-skilled jobs up and down the supply chain in prefabricated and modular housing factories like this one, in innovative housing research, such as at the UBC Smart Structures, which I visited just in February, and in our world-class forestry industry. Our plan will revitalize our construction sector, where in recent years, labor productivity has been stagnant and costs have risen over 50%. Prefabricated and modular housing will catalyze a productivity boom, while creating tens of thousands of not just jobs, but tens of thousands of new high-paying careers in the skilled trades. And as we announced just this past Saturday in Oakville, we will transform the opportunities for those who want to pursue those careers by covering the cost of apprenticeships, by doubling support for union training, and by providing the capital needed to expand capacity in post-secondary institutions. Our bold housing strategy will scale the demand for mass timber innovators such as Intelligent City. We're already ahead of the curve on mass timber. As of 2 years ago, over 600 mass timber projects have been completed here, almost twice the number in the United States. Mass timber is already almost a $500 million industry in Canada. That's projected to triple by the end of this decade. It can go much, much higher. We're thinking out of the box to build a prosperity that does not rely on the United States, that uses Canadian ingenuity to build Canada strong. On top of creating Build Canada homes, on top of building a thriving new housing industry with Canadian lumber at the heart of it, our housing plan will make the housing market work better, much better, to build more supply, to reduce costs for people who rent and those who buy. Over
the next 5 years, my government will cut construction charges on home building by half on multi-unit projects, which means a saving of some $60,000 on the average price of a home in Vancouver.
And that's why for the next 5 years, my government will cut development charges and taxes on home building in half for all multi-unit housing. That's about $60,000 off the cost of an average apartment in Vancouver. We'll bring back the multi-unit residential building tax incentive, which, when it was first introduced in the 1970s, spurred tens of thousands of rental housing units across this country. As you can see, our government will be ambitious, but we will also be pragmatic. We're going to double down on what's already working, such as the new Housing Accelerator Fund. Countless mayors who signed on in British Columbia, from Kelowna to Vancouver, have said that it's gaining traction in getting more homes built in their communities. So we'll reinforce it. And we'll also include public reporting on municipalities' progress to speed up permitting and approval timelines. The new homes that are built will be more energy efficient. They will be more cheap to live in. Today, I'm also announcing that a new Liberal government will invest more to power existing homes with efficient, affordable heating and cooling and make those homes more resilient to extreme weather. We're funding home retrofits like heat pumps or old window replacements that will lower the utility bills of Canadians while reducing household emissions. At the same time, we will fund roof replacements, foundation repairs, and more to protect Canadians' homes from floods and wildfires that are becoming increasingly common because of climate change. These new programs will be largely financed by the new large emitter carbon credit market, meaning that big polluters, not taxpayers, will pay. It's a smart system that will work better for everyone. With
my government's plan on housing, we will renew our way of building, because in a crisis, we cannot simply maintain the status quo.
This is an all-hands-on-deck industrial strategy to get millions more homes built using high-quality, sustainable Canadian lumber. It recognizes that young Canadians can't wait any longer. It recognizes that they deserve the same opportunities that previous generations like mine had. It recognizes that sometimes your government needs to step in and step up. Now, unfortunately, there is someone who doesn't get that. Pierre Poilievre thinks government should do nothing. He'd even cancel that Housing Accelerator Fund, despite the success the municipalities across this province, across this country, and despite the pleas of many of his own candidates who've been begging for Housing Accelerator Fund money for their communities. Pierre Poilievre's answer to everything is a slogan and a tax cut. Unlike Pierre Poilievre, I've actually worked in the private sector. I know how the world works, and I know how it can be made to work better for everyone. I know Liberals know that markets, the private sector, are the most powerful tools we've ever invented, and they can help find solutions to our greatest problems. Yet we also know that markets can fall short, especially at times of great change. Our country has a huge need for new housing, and we must support our forestry industry through these challenging times and into a better future. These are insurmountable challenges if, like Pierre Poilievre, your only plan involves fiddling with the tax code and slashing programs that work. But if you actually want to build the future, this is an amazing opportunity. An opportunity to create an entirely new housing industry, one that will create tens of thousands of careers up and down the housing supply chain. An industry that can help sustain tens of thousands of jobs in our BC forestry industry, all while reducing our reliance on the United States. We can give ourselves more than any foreign government, including the United States, can ever take away. Nous pouvons accomplir des choses qui, dans le passé, auraient semblé.
We can accomplish things which in the past would have seemed impossible. At a speed that is unprecedented, we can build here at home, as we have done in the past.
We can create secure careers, a strong economy, affordable homes. Nous allons non seulement protéger les travailleurs de l'industrie forestière.
We will not only protect workers in the forest industry, we will build a forestry industry that is stronger than ever, an industry that will create good jobs and wealth for generations to come here in British Columbia, in Quebec, and everywhere in the country.
For our country, stronger than ever. We can build Canada strong. Thank you, merci, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll do 15 minutes of question with our media delegation and turn over to locals. CBC.
Hello, Karina Roman, CBC News. When the Liberals have won government, most times it's without needing to do well in the West. You're in the West, you're headed to Calgary, you're here making your pitch to voters in the West. How do you convince them that you care about their issues if the West isn't key for the Liberals in terms of a path to victory?
Well, you know, let me say a couple of things. First, I'm not a career politician. I'm a pragmatist. I'm here to get things done. I'm here to address a series of crises. The crisis, first and foremost, with the United States, the crisis in housing, the cost of living crisis. And I'm bringing that perspective. I am asking for, through the Liberal Party, for the support of all Canadians to serve all Canadians for those crises. I happen to be from the West. I have deep ties to Alberta, where I grew up, ties to the territories where I was born, and ties to BC, where my family, my mother and my sister now live. I know the West, and I think I have a good sense, buttressed by our candidates here in British Columbia, of what's required. And the last point, and I'll hand back, is that the scale of what we're announcing today, the scale and the degree to which what we're announcing spreads across the needs of the West, the needs, and I'll speak specifically to British Columbia. A cutting-edge industry, as represented by this company. A huge challenge for our people in housing. Integrating all of the solutions back into the core that help build British Columbia, our forestry industry, and solving multiple problems at the same time, providing a better life for people in the West and across Canada. That's the approach we'll take. And that's why we're here asking for the support of voters in British Columbia and across the West. Thank you.
En français.
En français, j'ai grandi en Alberta. Ma famille habite.
I grew up in Alberta. My family lives in British Columbia. I was born in the Northwest Territories. And But I'm not a politician. I'm not a career politician. I'm a pragmatist. And I work for all Canadians, including, of course, citizens of Western Canada. And this announcement today indicates the approach and the strategy of the Liberal Party. We find solutions, big solutions, for the most severe problems for the people who live here. The housing crisis with a strategy that creates a new industry here in British Columbia, including the forestry sector.
And for a follow-up, do you worry that making jokes about Premier Daniel Smith will contribute to Western alienation?
It was a lighthearted comment. I have a lot of respect for the Premier. We've worked together, including on the agreement at First Ministers, the unanimous agreement on First Ministers of having one Canadian economy as opposed to 13, developing new trade and energy corridors. I refer to our meeting in Ottawa of 2.5 weeks ago. There is a lot of opportunity for Alberta, for Canada, and my government will spare no effort to make sure that the people of Alberta, the people of Canada realize those opportunities. Thank you.
No. Next question.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Carney. Abigail Beeman, CTV News. On tax havens in relation to Brookfield, you've said that you know how the world works. Should Canadians infer from that that you wouldn't condemn the use of tax havens?
I've a long career in the private sector. I've a longer career in the public sector. What's important is that we have a effective tax system, and that every company follows the rules of those tax to not just the letter but the spirit of those regulations. And we need to continue to refine our tax system to ensure that companies are paying their fair share of tax. And my government will also ensure that the federal government is spending only those dollars that are necessary. So one of the core elements of our strategy is to spend less as a federal government so that Canada can invest more. And I'll finish on this point, which is we want to make sure that scarce federal dollars, taxpayers' dollars, catalyze enormous private investment. And so the scale of what we're looking to do in the housing sector is indicative of that. Scarce dollars, massive private investment.
I'd also like to ask you to respond to Mr. Poilievre's rallies. He's attracting thousands of people who are motivated in a way we haven't seen in quite a while. A lot of them don't like you. If you were to win, how would you address that segment of the population? I think
the first is to recognize that as a government, you serve all Canadians. That's fundamental. It goes to the previous question with respect to the West. It goes to your question. I am not running to be a MP for a segment of Nepean, which is the constituency, the riding in which I'm running. I'm not running for a segment. I'm running to represent all the people of Nepean. With my Liberal colleagues, they are doing the same. But if we form government, if Canadians give us that trust, we then serve all Canadians equally. It's a sacred honor to be bestowed on individuals, and one I take exceptionally seriously. Thank you. En ce qui concerne, je suis.
I am.
Comme étant député pour Nepean, si ce sera la décision des électeurs.
Being the MP for Nepean, if that is the people's decision, I will be an MP for all of the citizens of Nepean, not just those who voted for the Liberal Party. And it's the same thing for all of the MPs, all the candidates. And as a government, we serve all Canadians. And that is a responsibility that is fundamental in our system.
The site election task force is reporting a PRC-linked campaign that focused on you and your campaign. Can you share anything more about what you were briefed on, and are you comfortable with that support?
Well, a couple of things I'll say. So one of the steps I took as Prime Minister was to review all the measures, or review the measures to ensure electoral integrity, to fight against foreign interference, and so some of that is just briefing on specific situations, which obviously I can't share. But I approved some structural changes, which included that the site task force publicly report any incidents that they became aware of in real time. So as you would know, but maybe others don't, this is the third public report they've made. So I felt it important that there was that transparency. And that transparency will continue. I note that the critical evaluation panel, I believe it's called, that is associated with the site task force, makes their judgment about the seriousness or not of these incidents, and that in their judgment that this does not affect the ability of the country to conduct a free and fair election. But I fundamentally think that what's important is Canadians get that transparency in real time, and I think it's been a welcome development to for Canadians, but also a warning to foreign actors that we are on top of these things.
From my understanding, some of the campaign was pushing positive narratives about you. Why do you think that China, the PRC, seems to like you? Why are they praising you?
I have absolutely no idea, and I have absolutely no idea, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Catherine Lévesque, National Post. Good morning.
Good morning.
Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper had lots of things to say about you yesterday. One of them being that he worked with yourself and Pierre Poilievre, and he would prefer Mr. Poilievre over you. Would you like to respond to that? And why did you refuse to become his finance minister?
Okay, packed a lot in there. Look, Stephen Harper appointed me Governor of the Bank of Canada. I worked closely with the late and great Jim Flaherty during the financial crisis. We resolved a number of situations. Many people are familiar with that experience. I note that Pierre Poilievre was not at any of those tables, was not given any of that responsibilities, and note further that in subsequent years he has not gained any responsibility in managing crises or difficult situations. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
En français, j'ai travaillé pendant la période de la crise financière mondiale
during the
dans une étroite
financial
collaboration
crisis
avec M. Flaherty.
in close collaboration with Mr. Flaherty. He was exceptional as a finance minister. And I note that around all the tables, well, Mr. Poilievre was not at any table, ever. He's got no experience to manage crises, or to build a strong economy. Not at that time, and not afterwards.
You just want look.
You said it yourself. That
I didn't think it was appropriate to move from my position into that role.
Bonjour, Monsieur Carney, Christian Noël de Radio-Canada. Il y a des migrants haïtiens en ce moment qui fuient les États-Unis pour
There
rentrer au
are
Canada
some
de
Haitian
façon
migrants right now who are fleeing the U.S. to come to Canada irregularly because they are fleeing Donald Trump. Should we send them back or welcome them? Well, first, I recognize the strong increase of asylum seekers who are coming from the U.S. We have a safe country agreement with the U.S. And in that agreement, we can send them back to the U.S. In my opinion, it remains appropriate to do so. So, Mr. Trudeau, contrary to what Mr. Trudeau was saying, who was like, we would welcome them in Canada, the situation in the U.S. has changed because there now exists the possibility of a wave of asylum seekers, and we have to work, Canada and the U.S. have to work in closer collaboration so as to manage this situation. It's not acceptable that the U.S. is sending us all of their asylum seekers. So the situation has changed quite a bit.
Phil Melnichuk, Delta Optimist newspaper. I'm just wondering, after the meeting with Premier Eby yesterday, if you have any further details to share on support for softwood lumber, National Transportation Corridor, and in particular, the funding for the Fraser River Tunnel?
First off, I want to thank Premier Eby for the meeting yesterday. It was very constructive. We talked at great length in terms of Canada's strategy and, with respect to U.S. tariffs and with respect to softwood lumber. As you may know, the tariffs announced, proposed tariffs announced by the U.S. Trade Representative a couple of days ago would take effect in August. So we have a bit of time to put the full strategy in place, although we watched the whole thing. So we had discussion around that. We had discussion around the $20 million fund for the competitiveness that the federal government has put, that I'm proposing the federal government would put forward, and how we'd work on that. We talked about today's announcements and how that works to supply big support for demand here in the BC forest sector, and as well how we could integrate that with other housing measures. So all of that is, so we had quite a comprehensive discussion. On, with respect to the Fraser River Tunnel, I would say this: we have put in place, or we have proposed during the election campaign, a $5 billion fund for trade infrastructure, trade and commercial infrastructure, and it would be, I fully understand the pressing need for progress here. You can just see it this morning driving here, but I understand it on a deeper technical level. So we're putting in place the tools. I expect to have very strong and productive cooperation with Premier Eby's government on this and other areas. Thank you.
Next question.
Good morning, Thomas Steele from Bloomberg News. Trump's so-called reciprocal tariffs come into effect tomorrow, and it seems like there's a bit of a queue now forming to negotiate with his administration, Japan, etc. They want to cut bilateral deals. So is there some pressure to get talks going now rather than waiting a month until the election is over? Well,
the first thing I'd say is that President Trump and I, in advance of the reciprocal tariffs, agreed that we would have a comprehensive negotiation after the election, which, as you know, is in less than 3 weeks' time, literally, potentially, starting the day after the election. So the Prime Minister at that point, which I'm working very hard to earn the vote so that it would be me, but would begin those negotiations with the President. So that's the situation. I think we have to be realistic that during an election period, we have the ability, we ensured that we had the ability to respond to counter tariffs, but that is different than negotiating any element of a new agreement during what is a caretaker period of the government. Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, Jared Yeager here with the Western Standard. So yesterday at your rally, you said Pierre Poilievre's plan is to, quote, divide and be conquered. As of now, Canada is reliant on the U.S. to get our own oil from one side of the country to the other. By not repealing Bill C-69 and allowing Quebec to veto a pipeline across Canada, are you not yourself setting up Canada to be divided and conquered?
Absolutely not. In fact, in the premise of your question, you answer it, which is, if we are going to build, and I am a proponent of building big energy infrastructure in this country, but if we are going to build big energy infrastructure in this country, there is a we in that. It is not imposed. It is not imposed by the federal government. It's not imposed by an opposition politician. It's not imposed by a company. It requires the support of, in the example you gave, in Energy East of Quebec, the other provinces that are affected. It requires the support, the free, prior, and informed consent of First Nations. So that's the exact opposite, which is that coming together to build. Now, what I've proposed, both at the First Minister's level and more broadly, is that we as a country use this crisis to identify those projects of national interest, many of which, not all of which, but many of which are energy infrastructure projects, so that we can get those agreements, so that we can come together and we can accelerate. And last point, with respect to C-69, what I've also been clear about is the ability under C-69, not as it was, but as it is, and the Minister of Natural Resources, Mr. Wilkinson, is here, as it is under his leadership, we have an ability to rely on, as appropriate, impact assessments that are performed at different levels of government. And that is part and parcel of how we can make this work. So I reject the question, but I hope I've provided some illumination. Thank you.
We'll take one last question.
Bonjour, M. Carney. Michel Sabat pour la presse canadienne. À peine un peu plus du tiers de vos candidats sont des femmes. Pourquoi avez-vous choisi de ne
Around
pas
a
vous
third of
placer
your
dans la
candidates are women. Why have you chosen to not be at par? Once again, there's only about a third of your candidates who are women. Around 36% of your candidates are women. So why have you chosen to not be in the parity zone, around half and half? Well, the numbers are as they are, but I am dedicated to having, for example, a cabinet that is balanced during the mandate of the government. And at this point, among the candidates, there's 23 ministers and 11 women, so we will balance it if we form the government. We will balance it throughout the mandate, but thank you for your question.
And you have been listening to Liberal leader Mark Carney, who is in Delta, British Columbia. He said that once again, the U.S. is targeting the forestry industry, doubling softwood lumber levies, and that is integral to building homes across the United States. Once again, reiterating that this is hurtful to American home builders and to American consumers. He said, we are going to build a new economy, the strongest in the G7. We will use more lumber in our plan to build more homes here at home, announcing, as he has in the last days, the largest home building plan since the Second World War, with 500,000, aiming for 500,000 new homes every year. He said, I'm not a career politician. I'm here to get things done. I'm asking for the support of all Canadians, because he was asked about the West and British Columbia and Alberta. He says, I was born in Northwest Territories. I grew up in Alberta. He has family in British Columbia, so I know the West in a good sense. I have a good sense of the West. He said, I'm a pragmatist, and when asked about tax havens, he said he had a long career in the private sector, but a longer one in the public sector, that we needed an effective tax system, that every company that follows not just the letter but the spirit of the law, that needs to be refined. He talked about how Mr. Poilievre, the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, has never been at a negotiating table ever, that he has. He has no experience doing that whatsoever. He was asked about a story around Haitian migrants coming to the Canadian border. He said I recognize that the strong increase in asylum seekers coming from the United States, we can send them back, and that remains the appropriate thing to do. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian was listening in, and he joins us now live. So Rafi, what stood out for you from Mark Carney's remarks?
Well, Andrew, that last point you mentioned that he said, Haitian asylum seekers can be sent back to the States. That's quite a marked contrast from what Justin Trudeau had said in 2017 when he had famously tweeted that asylum seekers would be welcomed to Canada with open arms. So that shows you a little bit of a difference in approach between these two Liberal leaders when it comes to that question. You also nodded to how he attacked Pierre Poilievre, saying Poilievre has no experience about a negotiating table. That was specifically in response to a question about Stephen Harper's remarks last night. Harper had said that he had worked with both men and Poilievre was his choice, and that's how Carney chose to respond, saying that he was the one with the experience around negotiating tables, dealing with the recession in late 2008 and so on and so forth. So it's kind of him pushing back against that narrative that Stephen Harper was trying to set last night in Edmonton.
Rafi, thank you. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian in Ottawa will speak again soon. You're looking live at Vancouver. Both the Liberal and NDP leaders are campaigning in British Columbia today. We will continue to bring you coverage of this federal election campaign right here on CBC News Network.